This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
No, cut that. Keep that. Someday it's going to be worth something.
Russ Wakelin.
You put me in an AT-ST with frickin' Wookiees attacking me and whatnot?
Now you're talking. And Geoff Engelstein in the third chair.
E to the pi I plus 1 equals 0.
With contributions from Total Fangirl
Vampires do not sparkle.
and our loyal listeners.
Crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming, coming to the speed of a cloud giant using a transportation by plant spell to drop from a cloud castle.
Yeah.
Today's edition is brought to you by all of our fine friends over at Patreon. These are the men and women who keep the lights on and keep this show rolling, bringing tons of not too horrible material to your door every couple of weeks.
Right.
And today I'd like to thank Noah Siemens, Patrick Allen, Patrick Donovan, Patrick Draboch, oh my God, Draboch, oh, there you go, and Paul Buddha. Buddha. Oh my God, 2 in a row. I'm Geekling Minotic, your host, and our panelists are Russ Gargantua Wakelin and the Professor of Pastimes, eminent game designer and extraordinary podcaster himself, Geoff Engelstein. Let's begin. Issue number 1. New York University, also known as NYU, is a private nonprofit research university based in New York City. Founded in 1831, NYU is considered one of the world's most influential research universities. Among its faculty and alumni are 37 Nobel laureates, over 30 Pulitzer Prize winners, over 30 Academy Award winners, and one friend of the D6 generation. Question. According to the university rankings compiled by Times Higher Education, U.S. News and World Report, and the academic ranking of world universities, all rank NYU among the top how many universities in the world? Leif Reistroff Ross.
I'm going to go with 17.
Pierre Germain Jeff.
30?
Wrong! Oh, he's so close. He's so close. If it wasn't for that pathetic little whine in his voice, I would have given it to him. Among the top 32 universities, Jeff. Mr. I got so many right last time. Well,
I thought this was Price is Right rules, isn't it? Close without going
begins.
over?
No, that would be Wits and Wagers. Issue number 2. Giants are monsters of human appearance, but prodigious size and strength, common in the mythology and legends of many different cultures. The word giant, coined in 1297, was derived from the word gigantes of Greek mythology. Generally, giants are portrayed as chaotic, violent, stupid. Question. What kind of giant is the creature from the original Jack and the Beanstalk folktale? Ravana Russ.
Semi-drunk.
Gaiji's Jeff.
Irivanavguden.
Wrong! It was actually not a giant at all. It was an ogre.
Ooh.
Giants don't actually eat people, unless they're hill giants, apparently. I don't know. Issue number 3. Virtual reality, or VR, typically refers to computer technologies that use virtual reality headsets to generate realistic images, sounds, and other sensations that replicate a real environment or create an imaginary setting. Question. The term virtual reality was first used by French playwright Antonin Artaud in what year? World Viz Wakelin.
1872.
Caster Engelstein.
1957.
Oh, he's closer than Wakelin, but still wrong! 1938, gentlemen. He was referring, of course, to the strange nature of actors in a play. But anyway, issue number 4. The Expanse is an American science fiction television series on SyFy developed by Mark Fergus and Hawk Otsby, based on the series of novels by Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, written under the pseudonym James S.A. Corey. It is also the most anticipated new game title coming from WizKids in the near future. Question. Rocinante, of course, is the name of Don Quixote's horse, as well as the spaceship in The Expanse. What was the name of the pilot episode of the entire television show, The Expanse? Roberta Russ.
Tilting windmills.
Arjun Jeff.
I should know this, and I'm going to get into serious trouble because I'm not knowing this, but I'm going to say remember the Cant.
Oh, he's so... Oh, no, but wrong! Dulcinea! Don Quixote's ephemeral, mysterious lady love, a.k.a. Julie Mao. That's it for now. Thanks for listening, and good night.
This episode of the D6 Generation is brought to you by Lone Wolf Development. Take your game to the next level.
And by Geek Nation Tours. Rise up and join the Geek Nation, touring the world at geeknationtours.com.
And by Audible. Try the service, get a free book, and support the show. All by visiting audibletrial.com/D6G. Hello!
Hello!
Hello.
Hey, and welcome to episode 212, Craig.
212. It almost makes us seem professional.
Something. Of the D6 Generation, I'm Russ Wakelin.
I'm Craigellon.
And I'm Geoff Engelstein.
Hey, Jeff!
Geoff Engelstein.
Oh, Jeff, we love having you on the show. It's so good to have you back. It's been far too long.
It seems like forever. We blame your child.
Yeah,
Yes. My daughter, I think, jumped in and took my slot. But no,
Yes.
Thanks for having me back. I always have a great time doing this.
Yeah, there is an Engelstein quotient that we can't exceed.
That's right. That's
but
right.
Jeff,
Sure, absolutely.
as many of you may know, Jeff, of course, gaming professor, game designer, escape room artist, as it were. If you follow him on social media, you know that happens a lot. So, Jeff, thank you for coming back on the show. So excited to talk. Of course, we'll chat with Jeff, catch up with him, what he's been up to, what he's been designing, what he's been doing. And then also we will review, just because it's lying about and I'm really enjoying it myself and my family, Assault of the Giants, also a little later this episode as well. Sound good?
Indeed.
Or something. Okay, good. Excellent. But first, we do have a little bit of, we should talk about the Lost Chapters, Craig. And what's nice about the Lost Chapters, you know, as many of our listeners will know, Craig and I venture forth now and then, and we found this particularly interesting Dunkin' Donuts that not only does it serve the classic New Englander's favorite snack of Dunkin' Donuts coffee and donuts, but also it somehow has like the Dunkin' Donuts at the edge of the universe and allows us to intersect with other Dunkin' Donuts across the globe, and sometimes we run into strange people. And in this case, we ran into Geoff.
We ran into a very strange person.
Exactly. So, Jeff,
yes.
Do you remember?
You fall through the donut hole, and you never know where you're going to end up.
You never know where you're going to end up. So, Jeff, do you recall what we discussed when we met in Dunkin' Donuts?
I do. We talked about virtual reality and the stuff that's new, the stuff that's coming out, and where the state of the art is right now.
Yeah, I had to query Jeff on this because I've been, I'm usually a very early adopter of tech, and somehow with VR I've sort of shied away. But Jeff's all in, so I wanted to really hear what his experience has been, and quite frankly, I'm dangerously close now to acquiring something.
Yeah, I think if you listen to that episode of The Lost Chapter, you will actually hear Russ tilt into the pro column.
You can hear the drool falling onto my Dunkin' Donuts chair.
And hear the money drain out of his wallet.
You can hear the credit card start to warm up. So, Craig, if someone wants to listen to us prattle on for additional hours of show in Dunkin' Donuts, what would they want to do?
Oh, they would listen to you. Tell them how to find The Lost Chapter on Patreon, Russ. Take it away.
You are so sly. Okay, so, yes, you go to thed6generation.com. In the upper right-hand corner, you will see an icon that has a Patreon P in it. You click the P, it takes you to Patreon, which has a video which describes, you see Craig and I standing there telling you why we do this Patreon thing, which basically allows you to support the show, put a little tip in the tip jar every time we put an episode up. And as a thank you, we give you access to bonus content, which includes the Lost Chapters, and you'll have access to the entire library, of which now there is over 100.
Wow.
Lost
That's
Chapter episodes, almost 130, I think we're on now. They're shorter, they're about 30 minutes long each, but it's bonus content. So if you want to hear us talk even more, that would be the place to go. So check that out, and we appreciate your support.
We do indeed.
So, Craig, what's the time now for?
Achievements in gaming.
It is, and achievements, of course, brought to us by all of our friends at Patreon. Jeff, what have you been playing lately?
Well, I guess one of the more recent games I've played has been Gloomhaven.
Oh,
which has been super duper hot. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to play that.
I've not played it, but I hear everybody talking about it all the time.
Yeah.
When I ran into Tom at PAX East, that's all he could talk about was Gloomhaven. What do you like about Gloomhaven?
Why is it on Board Game?
Yeah, why is it the hotness, Jeff? What does this make? What makes this game? Because it's a co-op dungeon crawler, right? Essentially,
right. Yes, it's basically it's Descent or trying to replace. It's very similar where it's a hex board with tiles that you put together based on missions that are in a mission book. But you don't need an overlord. It's just everything is the AI is run. But it's got so much stuff. It's been a long time since I've picked up a game that is this heavy. I didn't actually go out to buy it. I just happened to see it in the local game store. I had a copy there, and I knew it was like super hard to get. So I figured I would jump in and try it. And we actually
snag it while you can.
Snagged it while I could. Although they are having another Kickstarter now, and they're raising like millions of dollars. But I think they'll be okay. But it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting like legacy style, campaign style type features. Like in the beginning, you just have a choice of a couple of guys, and you open a box and a mini. But there's a whole bunch of other types of characters that are in there that you can't unlock until later. Oh. And in the beginning, you actually grab like sort of a life goal for your hero, and when they achieve that goal, you actually retire that character.
Oh, and then you pick a new one.
That unlocks another character. And you may like take a card for that character and put it into an encounter deck. So all of a sudden your old character may pop up in a future adventure or something like that.
That's neat. So you're kind of writing history for the universe as you play.
Yeah, and there's a big map with all the different places you can go, and you put stickers on the map to represent, things that are now open to you based on what happened. And so there's just a lot of that kind of stuff, and it tells our overarching story. We just played a couple of the opening scenarios, so I didn't really get super into it. But it's got a really clean system, although it's a little bit funky at first. But it's in the end, I think it gives you more tactical options maybe than Descent and things like that. So it's certainly interesting, but it's an investment. I mean, it's like a lifestyle kind of a game. You really you got to play it a lot to get the most out of it. Now, so that's been fun.
Now I'm more of I like my overlord role. So do you think this game, and I do, I mean, there are some co-ops I like out there. I like Undercity and things, but it's probably more for theme than mechanics. Do you find that this game sort of solves the lack of the overlord pretty well? Is it a lot of fun as a co-op?
Yeah, because the way they do it is actually there's like and this game comes with a ton of components, which I think I implied by the weight of it. It literally, I think it weighs like 22 pounds.
Wow,
or something, 23 pounds. It's really heavy, and one of the reasons is for every type of monster in the game, there's a deck of cards that are AI cards. Oh, wow. So basically, when the monster gets to go, you flip up a creature for each different type of monster that's there, and all of the creatures, sometimes they'll move super fast, or they'll get bonuses, or they'll just stand their ground, or they'll shoot arrows, or they'll heal, or whatever. But each creature has their own special type of deck with different moves they'll do. So over time, as you start facing the same critters over and over again, you'll learn their tricks and how to play around them. But in the beginning, you're just totally at their mercy because you don't know what they can do, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I didn't know that they could dash across the room and hit me over the head. That's a problem. So well, that's an interesting way that they do it.
Oh, very cool. Wow,
and there's a big giant book of like hundreds of different dungeons that you just tells you go to page number 72 and do this adventure.
So it does sound like a Legacy Games meets a co-op dungeon crawler, which sounds pretty good. I'm gonna have to check that out. Cool. What else you playing?
I've been I play this little game from Cool Mini or Not called Raise Your Goblets, which you actually, it has real actual little plastic goblets, and you put gems in it. Some represent poison and some represent wine and stuff like that, and you kind of pass them around and put them in other people's cups and secretly switch cups under the table and stuff like that. And then you have to decide whether you're going to drink the cup that's in front of you or the one that's in front of somebody else.
Well, I put the poison in the cup that's in front of me or in front of me.
Exactly. That's what it's trying to
That evoke. Line must come up over and over again with anybody over the age of 30.
The whole game is designed to elicit that line. And, it's fun. It's cute. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't necessarily rush back to it, but we enjoyed playing that. And I played, finally got to the table, this really deep worker placement game called Argent the Consortium. Are you guys familiar with that? That actually came out a couple of years ago. Yeah. It sort of represents a magic school. It's like a Hogwarts kind of a thing, and you are trying to get your people elected to the new school board. I guess it's the magical vicious school board election. But all these different rooms, and you put your pieces out to the rooms, and that do different things, and there's spells, and there's like 4 or 5 different types of workers that all do different things, and you can attack other people's workers. And I'd heard really good things about it, and I did enjoy that. There's a lot going on in that game, but if you like a real deep Euro worker placement experience with a lot of theme on top of it, I would definitely check that one out.
Okay, that sounds pretty cool.
And I've been doing lots of playtesting, which has been the main thing. So I've been we're actually working on some Dragon and Flagon expansion stuff.
Oh, cool.
So that
do tell.
Coming
anything? Out. Can you mention anything?
Steam powered robot.
The win. Sold.
Ta-da!
Right.
Yes.
Cool. Is it on a
we've
bigger
also came up
card?
with a way to physically make these giant masts that stick up off the board on the pirate side.
Oh,
We're trying to
awesome.
figure out what to do with them from a gameplay standpoint. So we'll work on that.
Clearly, they have to fall over and kill people. That would be my vote.
Yeah, sure, we can work on that.
So now,
yeah,
Jeff,
that's basically it for
well,
me.
I'm going to call you out on one. I've seen you've been tweeting Doodle Quest.
Uh-huh.
So
Yes.
So what is Doodle Quest?
Doodle Quest? I actually did play this recently. I ended up showing my class at NYU, and when I was talking about, we were doing a whole segment on kids games and stuff like that. This is one of my favorite kids games that's come out recently.
Right.
This is probably about 2 or 3 years old now, and I'm really upset that it didn't do better. But every person has. So you put in the center of the board. There's a whole series of these like 12-inch by 12-inch squares that are like puzzles, and there's
Right.
different levels of them. So for little kids, you do different, a simpler one than for other. But it'll like show like a path. You'll see you say you got to start in this corner and you got to end in this corner, and you get a +1 point for each starfish that you hit and -1 point for each shark that you hit, or something like that. And then everybody has a 12-inch, same size transparency and a dry erase pen. And you have to write on your dry erase, but you can't overlay it. You don't actually put it on the puzzle, right? You just
Right.
have it in front of you, and the puzzle's in the middle of the table. So everyone's just staring at it, and you're just trying to draw it just by perception of where it is. And then one by one, each person actually takes their transparency and overlays it onto the puzzle, and you see how well you did.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's like 50 different puzzles, and some you have to like circle divers without,
Right.
Circling the whales, or all these different fun things to do. And it's just a really clever idea. It's really simple to teach. It's fun with all ages, and it makes for a lot of laughs. So I saw recently it went on sale. I think somebody posted that it was on sale on Amazon, and I encouraged everybody to go and buy it.
I'm going there right now. I got to check that out. That sounds like my kind of game.
Yes.
I like those simple, silly, sort of different
Yep.
kind of interaction games. That's cool.
Yep. Dr. Eureka does that too, if you've seen that.
Oh yeah,
With
yeah.
these test tubes and these nicely colored marbles that you're pouring between the test tubes.
Very cool. That's awesome. Well, Craig, how about yourself?
Yeah.
What have you been playing lately, sir?
Well, let's see. You and I, Russ, played our first close to a full game of Rune Wars, the miniatures game from Fantasy Flight Games.
We did.
We did.
And we said it was a full game. It was just not quite a full-sized army. We were just a hair
Right.
shy of the 200-point allotment you're supposed to have.
Yeah,
And this is their minis. This is their new minis-based product, right?
Yes,
Exactly,
brandy
yeah.
new. Just came out literally like last week.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so
So
what's your verdict? Let's hear it.
Well, I think it's a lot cooler with the contents of 2 starter boxes.
Yes.
So basically, you doubled your model count, although that doesn't double the price because you can only field one of the hero model that comes in each starter. So you're dropping the points of your hero, and then if you multiply, like if you combine your units instead of having, like for instance, I know Russ tried to make one giant Death Star of
Yes, I did.
reanimates.
Yes.
And so then each individual reanimate costs less in the big giant Death Star. So that doesn't spend enough points to get you even close to 200 points. So in the starter you actually get roughly 100 points of each. And actually, if you give out any of the equipment cards, you can easily get to 100 points of the good guys and 100 points of the bad guys, as I see it anyway. And but you can't, by doubling the boxes, you can't really get to 200 points, which is what's considered a standard game. But it was fun. I would say I really like the system. I don't like the clutter.
Yes. It's a very tabletop cluttery game like X-Wing.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of every unit's got its own little set of dials to set, and there's lots of tokens that get involved on the
Yeah.
units. So
Lots of cards, big cards and little cards.
Yeah, I think if you're a board gamer used to like X-Wing and stuff like that, I don't think that'll bother you so much. If you're a miniature gamer who really likes a clean table where the models look like they're standing on a field with trees next to them and stuff, you're gonna that might be a little of a letdown for you. But the mechanics are really slick, and I'm looking forward to getting a little more variety and depth. And I really like the way you can build the units in different shapes, right? So like
Yes.
if you have a lot of guys, you can kind of give the illusion of variety by putting some of the giant worm rider dudes inside a big block of regular Joes, or put your hero with some guys, or make the unit really large. And I like the missions. I like the deployment zones. A lot of variety there. There's a lot to like about it. There's a real lot to like about it. But I just wish the table could be a little less cluttered. And I'm looking forward to some creative miniature gamers out there kind of building ways to do that and reduce the clutter while still looking cool. I think we're going to see.
Well, if you're worried about clutter,
I
you should stay away from Gloomhaven also then.
Oh, yeah.
Gloomhaven is just like covers the table with cards and decks and things and everywhere.
See, that happens.
So you guys, so you're still on. So I still have not yet made my ill-advised miniature game purchase for 2017. I allow myself one per year.
Yeah.
So maybe this should be it, or I'll have to wait and see.
I think you'll like the mechanics of it, Geoff. I know you appreciate interesting mechanics, and this has got some pretty cool ones. So this might be a good one to keep an eye on. I'd wait to see if the third faction and fourth faction makes it out before the end of the year, because that might be a good hint if it's doing well or not.
Yes. What is the Wakeland rule about the number of factions again?
4. There needs to be 4. Right now there are 2, but they've claimed that 2 more will come up at the end of the year, so they'll be within the Wakeland rule inside of 12 months of release. So if they do that, I'll feel pretty good about where they are. But we'll see. Yeah. It remains to be seen.
We'll have to see.
Yeah. So we'll keep going, Craig. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Okay, so then we played Assault of the Giants, which I'm sure we will discuss more detail later in this episode.
Indeed.
And then we had dinner, and Russ went home to do work.
Yes.
And I went back in, and I was all in on the Kickstarter for The Walking Dead. I'm a big fan of actually, because of the Kickstarter, I became a big fan of the comic. That's when I went and I bought all the big giant trade paperback, wicked, super ridiculously thick tomes to catch up on the comic. And I played the heck out of it during the Kickstarter when they had the playtest rules, and I played with a bunch of my friends, and I played with Reese, and we all really enjoyed it. And I hadn't played it. I hadn't opened my box since it came of the Kickstarter, which is one of the motivating factors behind my trying to swear off Kickstarters this year, was just the sheer number of Kickstarters that were piling up that I wasn't even opening because they were just coming at an inopportune time. So I went in and I got a demo. We played a full game, a small game, but a full game of that. Tim, local friend of the show, he's I don't know what they call them, but whatever the outrider or press ganger is for Mantic games, he is that. And he had a really cool board set up with a building and a bunch of destroyed vehicles that he'd made and painted up. And we played, and it was fun. It was it's a fast, quick beer and pretzel-y game, just like it was when I was using the playtest rules last year. And it got me to, when I got home, open my box and look at all my cool terrain that I have and all the cool models. And I think I will probably start looking to get that painted up because it was fun, and it reminded me that it was fun, and I want to play that some more. So
there you go.
That was me, Russ. What about you?
Well, now you've got Geoff torn between buying Walking Dead or Rune Wars.
I don't know, Geoff. Are you a fan of The Walking Dead?
I try to stay away from zombie games as a rule.
That's smart.
Yeah, well, then there you go. See, it's an easy.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, one of the main factions in Rune Wars is the undead. So,
well, just don't play them.
Yeah.
You know, they're not really zombies. I guess.
No, they're skeletons. And one thing I want to say too about because my games played are the same as Craig, so Rune Wars and Assault of the Giants, but add a little more color to Rune Wars. So I do think the miniatures are fantastic. I think they did a really good job with them. I love the way the bases work. The game looks good. A lot of people came up checking it out. And
are they they're pre-painted?
No, they're not pre-painted. They do require some assembly.
They're not assembled or painted.
Right. So there's a little bit of work to do there. I mean, they're not on sprues or anything, so the assembly's not too bad as a miniature gamer, but as a board gamer, it's a lot of assembly. You'll notice it's a miniature game, not a board game. But what I do like, I love the mechanics of the dials. The 2-part dial setting is really pretty clever, and it allows the factions fight very asymmetrically and also have very obvious strengths and weaknesses that are built right into the way the dials work and the mechanics on the cards are. So there's no extra, you got to really read the army special rules to understand what makes skeletons different from, human armored foot soldiers. It's just all built into the dials, the speed of the units, the max movement, how fast they can turn, what kind of special the skeletons cause fear while the humans have better defense. All that's just built right into the dials. They can shield wall. You don't have to know any of there's no list of cool moves your unit can do. It's just a set of dials you do and it just works. And so it's and as you play, you suddenly start to learn and discover, kind of like you mentioned about that other game, Jeff. As you start to play, you start to learn and discover what your army can do, where its strengths and weaknesses are, where do you want guys that are high initiative up front or in the back, and it's just really interesting combinations of mechanics that are really, I think, despite the clutter, I think the tactical options in this game are really very deep. So I really like that. So I think it's right now, I mentioned this, Craig, we were playing it. I think it's my favorite, this is going to sound very, compartmentalized, my very favorite large blocks of troops fantasy game. So of all those out there, this is the one. I mean, I think it, because I think it keeps it, and it also keeps the movement very clean. Now, if you've played any of those games before, sometimes the movement gets very fiddly with wheeling and different ways to move the large blocks. I think this handles it very, very nicely. In a very clean way. And I think also when units connect and fight and get, as we call it, the locked-in melee, as we sometimes say, they handle that mechanic very well also, and you don't get a lot of weird cases that you sometimes find in these miniature games too. So I think it's a really solid. And the other thing I think it gives it a big advantage is the fantasy, and I don't know if Craig agrees with me on this, but the Fantasy Flight methodology of publishing their rule books for their board games, they've taken to this miniature game. So you get a book of how to learn the game, but you also get a book that is designed to be a reference book with every keyword, in alphabetical order with a hugely great index and a big paragraph about each keyword. So if you want to look up like how morale works, it's right there. If you want to look up how, hand-to-hand combat works, it's right there. And so I think it's very easy to find the rules, and they're very clearly written. In fact, there was one debate we were having, and as I looked through the rules, I'm like, oh, is collision a term of art? And sure enough, there was an actual entry for collision to explain exactly what had happened and completely answered my rules. So it's not one of those games where you start finding yourselves, second-guessing, did you play it right, or quibbling with your opponent over a particular half an inch or rule. It all seems very clear to me. So I like that a lot, too. I like clean rules, so...
Right. Yeah, I personally like the system that they use of splitting into two rule books, the rule, the teaching rules, and the reference rules. I think is a great way to go.
I think it's very smart.
I think there were a couple things where I couldn't find a rule, so I mean, if I had an index, I'd be excited.
Yeah, there is an index, but the problem is they like the word melee is not in there, but the word combat is. So you have to kind of know that. Combat is actually C for combat, not M for melee. And I looked for melee. So it's going to take you a little while to learn what they call certain things, right? That's one of the downsides. But it is pretty good. What about modeling, Jeff? I know you're not a big... Well, you do have some miniature games in your repertoire. What have you been doing? Any modeling or building lately?
I haven't done much lately. I've kind of either gotten on the wagon or off the wagon on that, depending on your perspective, I suppose. But I have been somewhat crafty.
Crafty counts.
I've been a lot of my games lately have been card-based games.
Yep.
Between Expanse has a lot of cards, and Dragon Flagon had a lot of cards, and the Fog of War is like 300 cards. So after spending hours and hours with a metal ruler and an X-Acto knife, I finally got smart, and I went out and bought a super fancy heavy-duty rotary cutter, and I'm going to give him a shout-out because it has changed my life, and I love it so much.
Changed my life.
The Carl C-A-R-L heavy-duty rotary paper cutter.
Ooh,
it wasn't that cheap, but I got it off Amazon, and
now,
it wasn't horrendous. But
are these like the ones? Are these like the ones that they use for? My wife used to scrapbook a lot, so she had some pretty fancy paper cutters. These are like the ones where it's like a little sort of wheel thing on a running like line that goes on top of a plastic sheet, so you line your page up and run it down.
It handles a big stack of cardstock, so you can do like 6 or 7 sheets all at the same time, and it like clamps them down and holds them in place. So you're just like take your stack of cardstock and put it down, and you just grab the thing, go and you cut off one side, and you go and you just do that, and so I can cut out a deck of 52 cards now in like 60 seconds. I'm done.
See, Craig's already ordering one so he can make his own sheets.
It makes a big difference.
That is a hefty chunk of change, though.
Time is money, man. What can I tell you?
That's true. If you're making lots of cards, then
he's a highfalutin professor now.
That's why I kind of hesitated investing in it, but it was worth it in the end.
It's Prime. It's Prime.
Amazon Prime, right? So. Free shipping.
Sure. At least you don't have to pay shipping.
So there's something for that. But it's as a designer who's doing so many cards and everything, and constantly, constantly doing that stuff, it has more than paid for itself for me.
That is hardcore.
No, that makes perfect sense, actually.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah. That's smart. Yeah. I'd say that counts as modeling. Good one. That's a nice one. How about you, Craig?
Modeling for me. I am working on the Shadow War Armageddon terrain, so that new Necromunda game. The terrain for it is very industrial. It's very Games Workshop, grim, dark, skulls everywhere. This is actually Adeptus Mechanicus stuff, so that, half mechanical, half human skull is everywhere, including this really cool kind of loader mechanism that looks like somebody made it a giant skull with a crab. That's really cool. So, and it's typical GW. The detail is crazy. I'm trying to do that Zenithan spray that Ash was talking about, where you kind of you spray one color and then you spray from the top where the light would come, a lighter color, sort of to get almost like a dry brushy feeling before you ever even paint, just at the priming stage. And I'm really excited about having done that. And then let me. I'm gonna hand it off to you for a second, Russ, because I need to give a shout out to somebody, to a longtime listener who really helped with a color. So,
Okay.
What have you been working on?
Well, this doesn't really count as modeling, but it's sort of it's a transportation system. So I actually backed 2 different Kickstarters, Jeff, and I don't know if you're familiar with these. They both shipped at the same time, so it's kind of weird. I backed 2 different Kickstarters that were centered around how to more efficiently store and transport your games, your board games. And so the first one is the Game Canopy. Now, the Game Canopy takes the angle that we as board gamers really like to keep our games in their original boxes. And so the Game Canopy is designed to be a rather large, think of it like as a miniature bag for board games. So it's a rather large bag that has a very deliberate way the zipper works to open really wide. And you can put like 3 to 4 to 6, depending on their size and depth, board games in there, either horizontally or vertically, depending on your preferred way. And it comes with a nice strap, and it looks really nice. And what I have to say is I was very impressed with the quality and just the materials, how it was built. It's a really nice-looking bag. And I like it a lot, but I got it to go along with the other thing I invested in, which is the Game Folios. Now, Jeff, are you familiar with the Game Folios?
I am not.
So the Game Folio is an interesting idea. Now, the Game Folio is designed for the board gamer who's not quite as attached to his or her boxes as others might be. So what the Game Folio does is it's these little, and Craig's seen them, it's these little zipper little mini boxes about the size of, I don't know, like a 3-ring binder, Craig, maybe? Something like that?
Yeah, about that. Yeah, I would say.
And you unzip it, and it's got inside, it is filled with these translucent little pockets and that are sewn into the top and bottom of this thing. And then in addition to that, each one is also filled with a bunch of zipper translucent, but they're not like Ziploc bags. Actually much nicer than that. Hard plastic clear, well, they're flexible, but clear little baggies, if you will, for tokens as well. And then also the way they're designed, there's a larger pocket for the board, and then the outside there's a clear pocket for the rules. So you put the rules on the outside. They're protected from weather, but you can see through them. See, to the rule book, if it has a nice art on it, you see that. The inside gets the board, and there's plenty of little pods to organize all the bits. And so you can basically collapse down pretty much any average board game into the thing the size a little smaller, about the size of a 3-ring binder. And these things are all designed to go on a shelf like a book almost. And they have great, well-positioned, well-thought-out little plastic back spines on them, so you can slide little pieces of paper or artwork in there so you can identify it. They also have great little handles. So what I like about it is I can throw 2 of these in a standard backpack, no problem. So I can take 2 or 3 board games with me to PAX, which I actually did, or Adepticon. You can throw them right in your luggage. You can also just carry them to the game store with you. Now you can choose to then re-put your game back in its original box. Or if you're like me, you ordered 7 of these things and you saw how many games you could store in such a small space, and you're like, I think I need more of these. So I like them, but I'm not super, because it depends on the game box for me, right? Like I do have some game boxes where they have the awesome vacuum-formed interior box control. Those I have an emotional problem getting rid of. But if it's a Fantasy Flight game, which basically means they threw it all in a giant tub and made a box that's really way too big for the components you get, except for like Rune Wars, I have no problem putting them into a more reasonably sized little tote thing. What's really cool is I can fit like, many more of these things right into my Game Folio. So now my Game Folio can carry quite a few more games that are pre-stored, But as Craig saw, it's very easy to pop a couple of these things out, throw them in your backpack, be ready to go with your game. I even got Assault of the Giants into one of these, even with the miniatures that are involved with it. So,
I'll check it out.
Pleased.
I mean, I'm pushing. I'm getting close to 2,000 games in my collection right now, so I may need to shrink some of them a little bit.
But that's 2,000 game folios. So if you're going that's
a lot of boxes.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's not cheap. But you could always go the route that the games you move around with a lot. And there's always a few games in your collection the box is way the wrong size for them, right?
Yeah, sure.
So
absolutely.
What I really like is the little clear pockets that are sewn on the inside too, because you can put all your decks of cards in there, all pre-sorted. It sort of takes box control and portability all into one solution. So and the quality's really there, Craig. I don't know if you noticed them. I thought they were really good.
Yeah. Oh no, they're very heavy duty. Yeah, absolutely.
So I was really happy. So it's 2 Kickstarters that both really came in right. Actually exceeded my expectations in both fronts. Game Canopy and the Game Folio. Not related. Not the same. I tweeted them together in a picture and it freaked people out because they're not the same. They're different. They're 2 different things, but they're both really cool. So, Craig, who did you want to give a shout out to for helping?
Okay, Kelly Cottle. Kelly, thank you very much. Okay, so I've been looking for a really cool color for like sort of municipal, like subway stations and bus stations and stuff like that for my urban terrain. And she tweeted out a picture to me of her Armageddon stuff, of her Shadow War Armageddon stuff, and she used necrotic flesh from the Army Painter system. And it actually is a green color, and with the brown wash, it looks like a really cool kind of grubby municipal kind of urban green sort of color. So I'm using that on my Shadow War Armageddon stuff, but I'm kind of like all of the support beams and everything are going to be that, and all the big giant plates are going to be that. And then I also use the bolt gun metal or whatever, the gun metal silver, whatever the metal is called, for the Army Painter, and I sprayed that with like other pieces with that. So with just those 2 primings, I got the terrain is like half done, which was super exciting. And then the awesome thing about Army Painter that I think is all of their spray primer range you can also get in bottled paints.
Oh, nice.
So I was able to, like, all of the planking and everything and all the walkways, the detail, like I was going to say, the detail it's all GW. I mean, it's crazy detail, really, really deep in there. So you've got the grading of the walkway, but then underneath the grading, you've got all kinds of different wires and cables and gauges and tubes and all kinds of other little details. And so I was able to spray the walkway with the silver, and then with just a dry brush of the necrotic flesh bottled paint, I was able to bring that up to the same color as all the support struts and everything else, so that it really kind of unifies it all together. I'm going to do the same thing with the big armor plates on some of the larger industrial pieces. And I think then just a quick, I might go over some of the more obvious cables with just like black or maybe black and yellow stripes or something, but something really quick, and then just a wash. And I think it's really going to pop. So I'm really excited about that. Finishing up the Hearst Arts spaceship areas that I did, the bridge and everything. I actually put it all together with the plastic inserts for all the windows, so they all look really cool and fully realized. And then the Antinacetti's workshop stuff that I found that I got ages ago that I never put together and never painted. So I now have beds and couches and like armor and weapon cabinets and control consoles, including a pilot station for the bridge. So I've got all these cool things. And so all of those different rooms that I have for the spaceships or the space station or whatever we want to use it for can now be like, the purpose of them can be more specific. So it could be like a bedroom, or it could be a barracks, or it could be, I have a whole range of medical bay stuff. So I'm really excited about that. And because of our game last night, I got super jazzed and did a Zenithal priming for the all of the Rune Wars models.
Oh, nice.
So
awesome.
I primed all the undead with a brown, and then did a quick white Zenithal coat over the top of them to kind of highlight it. And I did the humans black, and then a Zenithal white over the top of them. I still don't know colors. I think I'm going to go, no, I don't even know.
Now, how long did it take? Did you do all the models in your collection already?
I did. And it took me probably about 45 minutes to lay them all, to take them all out of their trays, put them all on the big cardboard boxes that I use to do my priming on, and then spray them, and then spray them again to make sure that I didn't miss anything, and then do the zenithal over the top. And it started raining halfway through, so I had to stop and then go to. So
Well, that's awkward.
So about 45 minutes, I would say,
That's
all
not bad.
told.
And how do they look at this point? I mean, they're not probably quite
Well, they're. I mean,
ready, but they're pretty good.
They really, even just primed, they stop looking like board game pieces and really start to look like really cool miniatures.
Oh, cool!
So I'm excited about that. Yeah,
So a quick dry brush,
I think,
and they're pretty. They're going to be.
Yeah,
close
exactly. I'm not going to put too much time and effort into them.
Yeah.
Like you say, I'm probably gonna dry brush, hit them with a couple base coats, and then wash them, and then call it a day. But I think even that will do a lot of justice to these models because there's a lot of detail. So I'm very excited about that.
Very cool.
And so thanks again, Kelly. Appreciate it.
There you go. So Jeff.
Yeah.
What about other
See,
guest
now
number
you see
3?
the truth behind the show is it's all
That's
just generic, and they dub in the guest names
We
later.
do.
They just record everything in advance.
So
guest.
So Geoff Engelstein, please tell me what you've been doing. So Jeff, what have you been doing for other geeky goodness like video games, books, TV shows?
Well, a couple of things. The big thing I've been doing is a relatively new adventure game, I guess that's how, called Thistleweed Park.
Yeah, I'm playing that game. I love it.
Sort of in the style of the old LucasArts games.
Yeah, I love it.
You played that one?
I have. I'm not even halfway through. I'm about a third of the way through, I'd say.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, all growing up, I mean, that was always a thing that I did with my kids is we always would do the graphic adventure games and all that stuff. We did all the Telltale games and all those things. So Sydney is away in Japan on her junior year abroad adventure, which she's really enjoying. So Brian and I have been working our way through Thistleweed, and it's been really well done. It's fun. It's getting a little meta, but I think we're pretty close to the end.
I like the mechanic.
So that's been a lot of fun. So we recommend that one.
Yeah, I like how it shifts perspectives. I don't think I've seen that done too often. Most of the games you follow the same person all the way through.
Yeah. And it gets more complex as you go towards interleaving the characters and what they can do and stuff like that.
Yeah, which is interesting because I think there's several ports where the game forks, and it could have been different characters in different situations, and it depends on how your playthrough works, right? Which is kind of interesting. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yes. So that's been fun.
Yeah.
I've also fallen into a little bit of a black hole, which is the Blizzard game Heroes of the Storm.
Oh, God, that's a MOBA. Yeah. Oh, geez.
A MOBA game.
Yeah.
So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, but it's similar to like League of Legends is the big Grandmaster game in this category. And my kids both play tons of League of Legends, or at least used to. They've trailed off a little bit on that, but they always try to get me to play, and I would try it every once in a while. And there's just so many different things going on, and I'm usually pretty reasonable with dealing with complexity and stuff like that. But League just had way too much stuff and a lot of skill stuff that you needed to do. So my son talked me into trying Heroes of the Storm, which is a similar concept, but it's much more straightforward. I kind of think of it as League of Legends for dummies, so it fit me perfectly,
so
and I have been enjoying that. So that's been pretty cool. But like in League of Legends, for example, you get your individual character gets experience if you get the last shot. If you get the kill shot on one of the minions that are running around. So all the other stuff that happens to the minions, it just matters who gets the kill shot, and experience is done individually. So in certain situations, you want certain of your heroes on your team. It's a 5 versus 5 team game. You may want certain heroes to level up faster than other heroes, depending on what their role is and when they get their special powers. And there's items that you can buy. And it's all real time and very intense. And, people get irate if you don't know exactly what you're supposed to be doing and stuff like that. Whereas like in Heroes of the Storm, the whole team gets experience together and everybody levels up together, and there's no items to buy. You just get your powers as you reach certain levels and things like that. So the whole thing is much more streamlined, and the games are a lot faster. League games are typically 45 to 60 minutes. Right. And Heroes games are usually like 15 to 25 minutes.
Well, that's
something
nice.
Like that.
I like
so
the
it's
short,
a lot more manageable.
I like that.
So I've been enjoying that.
Now, that game's a mashup, right, of heroes from the Blizzard universes. So you might have a Diablo guy next to an Overwatch guy next to a StarCraft guy.
I've been playing a lot of Lucio.
Okay.
I play him in both Overwatch and in Heroes of the Storm, which is a real problem because in Heroes of the Storm, to do Lucio's ultimate move is the R key, and in Overwatch it's like the E key or something else, and
so it takes you out of it.
And I constantly hitting the wrong one, and it's a problem because I forget what game I'm playing. But and there's there's StarCraft guys, there's Raynor, and there's Kerrigan, and so there's a lot of different fun, crazy stuff like that.
That's fun, yeah.
And on the book front, I recently finished actually the second book in a series called the Broken Earth series by N.K. Jemisin. The first one is called The Fifth Season. It's just, I think it won the Hugo Award. That was kind of what turned me onto it. But it's a phenomenally well written series of books.
Nice.
And I like this kind of it's sort of fantasy / science fiction stuff. And I like this type of book where it's very, when you're beginning, really through a large chunk of the first book, you really don't know what's going on. I mean, you're following the characters, and it's really well written and it's interesting and everything, but the rules of the world and what has really happened and what people can really do and what is actually going on to make things happen is very unclear. The characters all understand it, but they don't take any effort to explain it to you. You have to kind of uncover it yourself and piece it together. And I really enjoy that. And, it's written on a very, high level. So I would really recommend that series. The third one, the final book in the series, is actually supposed to be coming out basically on my birthday when I'm out at Gen Con. So I've already pre-ordered that and I'm looking forward to that coming out. So that's the Broken Earth series. Like I said, the fifth season is the first one in that one. And we've been doing a lot of escape rooms. As you mentioned, a new escape room place just opened very close to my house here. So we went there actually right before Sydney went to Japan. We went, and I've probably done about 4 or 5 now. So those are a lot of fun. And I'm actually doing a corporate trip. I grabbed my company, and we've got like 30 of us, and we're going to at the escape room complex near our office, and we were taking over the whole place for a couple of hours. And I'm sticking people that don't like each other into the same rooms. And I'm trying to decide whether I want to do one of the rooms, or for those of you that haven't been to escape rooms, they actually watch the players in the room so they can give you appropriate hints and stuff like that, because they don't want people just sitting in the room for an hour being confused. They nudge you so that it's a dramatic finish, whether you do it or not. They want you to be close at the end. So they have people that watch you the whole time and will type hints and stuff like that, and they can see everything on the monitor. So I'm trying to decide if I want to just spend the hour sitting in the control room watching all the people from the office try to do it, or if I want to actually go in and do one of the rooms myself. So we'll see what I decide on that.
Oh, very cool. So that's it. We're looking to do that in office too. I've never done one, but they're becoming quite popular and they look really cool. So I'm looking forward to
and everyone's like really paranoid. I'm like, look, they don't actually lock you in the room. Right. You can walk out of the room at any time and just go to the bathroom and walk around in the hallway and then come back to the room. It's, don't worry about it. It's really not that big a deal. Right. So people just get super anxious.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
How about you, Craig?
Yeah.
Well, I finally finished going back over all of the Witcher novels, and so I started the newest one, which is called Tower of Swallows. I just started it today, so I don't know yet, but it's really cool not knowing where things are going next. Reading through the Shadow War Armageddon rulebook is a really interesting blast from the past because it's all second edition 40K rules.
Ooh.
So if you remember back that far, I mean, we're talking like 20 years, probably more than 20 years ago. And so it's fairly interesting. I don't even remember it well enough to say if there's any major differences, but I don't think there really are. So I think it's really intriguing and neat. And the way they opened it up, instead of gangs, it's actually kill teams from every faction in Warhammer 40,000, which I think is a smart move for them from a business perspective. No matter how much everybody wanted cool gangs again, this is a way that pretty much anyone who has a Warhammer 40,000 army is going to be able to play Shadow Wars Armageddon, which is it's also a cool way to kind of get back into the 40K universe without getting a giant army, because unless you're orcs, you're going to have about 10 models. If you're orcs, you can have up to 20. I was reading a lot of there. And then Savage Worlds, we're going to do a quick one or two session, I think. Savage Worlds Deadlands adventure this summer, and we're supposed to all be coming up with our characters. And I am drawing a total blank on inspiration for Deadlands characters. So if anybody has any cool concepts for a Deadlands character that they think I would enjoy playing, go ahead and toss it to me at Craig at the D6generation.com, and I will take a look. And what about you, Russ?
Well, I think I mentioned last time, doing a lot of video gaming, so I finished Horizon Zero Dawn. Really enjoyed that. I think I mentioned it last time, but really, start to finish, a great game. I mentioned it again, though, because I've started playing Mass Effect Andromeda. Now, Jeff, have you ever played any of the Mass Effect games?
I have not.
Okay.
I started Mass Effect 3 at one point, but...
So I'm really big fan of... I like all the BioWare games, so I'm a big fan of their whole style and their genre and the whole thing. And so I love Mass Effect. I waited on Andromeda to start it a couple, almost a month after it came out because I was finishing Zero Dawn. And I did. And there's been a bit of a sort of a, I don't know, online sort of disappointment with Mass Effect Andromeda. Generally not getting very strong reviews. A lot of people disappointed with it. Apparently, when it first came out, it was pretty glitchy. Apparently, a lot of critiques are on the writing, the way the characters kind of stand still when they talk. Some of their animations, I guess, were kind of weak. Now, there's been a patch since then, and so I've never played the pre-patched version. I didn't start playing it till after they patched it. But I have to say, I'm playing it, and it's the same old formula, but I don't care because I like Mass Effect, and I think the places they've refined it, I like. And quite frankly, people were raving about Horizon Zero Dawn, and I'm one of them. But what's interesting is people critical of Mass Effect, like, why didn't they do it like Zero Dawn? And quite frankly, I think the games, in terms of like character animations and talking to the characters, they kind of stand still in Zero Dawn too. I mean, there aren't too many games that do a good job of properly, fully having good emotional expression and animating their arms and fully when the characters are talking. There are a few. I think Assassin's Creed comes to mind as being one of the better ones at that. But I think Mass Effect does a good job, and I think it's on par. I don't find that missing at all. In fact, I think Horizon Zero Dawn did a not quite as strong a job with like larger groups of people. Like it always sort of there'd be 4 guys in the background, and you're supposed to believe that's an army, kind of thing. Whereas in Mass Effect, they do a better job with more people. But anyway, I'm loving the universe. I'm loving the story. I love the sort of the epic space opera thing happening there, the sci-fi, all of it. It's still got all, and I love the ship design. I love the art direction of Mass Effect. So really, really pleased with that. I'm having a great time with it. My oldest daughter also is totally into it. She's having a great time with it too. So that's been fun. Also, my poor youngest daughter, she keeps finding, she and my wife keep watching a new SyFy series when Rose and I are not available to watch some of the shows we all watch together. And so they keep falling in love with these one-season SyFy series. So at first they fell in love with Firefly, and she was very frustrated with that. And now she just fell in love with Being Human. I'm like, don't watch Being Human. There's only one season of that show, which is also great, by the way. So they keep doing this. I don't know what it is, but on the plus side, she's getting a lot of good experience with good, underrated sci-fi shows. On the other hand, she's not getting good, full binge-watching experience because she's only getting one season. So that's a shame. And for reading, I am back to the Custard Protocol series. So as many long-time listeners know, I am a fan of Gail Carriger's books, which basically take place in steampunk Victorian England with were creatures and characters who are primarily female and very concerned with how they look and proper etiquette, in addition to being spies and fighting the supernatural. So I just love the dichotomy she pulls off. And her the way she's able to juxtapose sort of the Victorian manners and priorities along with, a werewolf attacking someone and being very put out that he had his cravat on sideways. Those kinds of things are in there, and I think it's really hilarious. So, and she just does a really good job of injecting that humor in with the story. So, really enjoying the latest version of that as well. So, that's what I've been doing.
Cool.
Is that it?
I think that's it.
Achievements. All right, excellent. Well, there's achievements, folks. Woo.
Cha-ching.
And now, in an attempt to bring a small amount of dignity and decorum to this otherwise base form of entertainment, and I use the term loosely, I am proud to present...
Oh, get on with it. It's time for App of the Ep.
Seriously, Wakeland? I used to have my own segment, and now I'm relegating to announcing this pap...
Hey, you're lucky we still use you. Hey, and welcome back to another App of the Ep. This time around, I have an app that I want to talk about. I'm not sure I can highly recommend it, but my youngest daughter and I are really enjoying playing this thing. So I'm going to put it as a lowly recommendation, maybe a mediumly recommendation. Actually, we're enjoying it quite a bit, so I should say it's pretty fun. And the name of the app, you'll see it. It's called C.A.T.S. C.A.T.S. And it's an acronym, something like crash, assault, trash, and smash, or something. I can't remember the exact what the letters stand for, but it's basically fight. The premise of this is it is a sort of a little cutesy animation style game, and basically these cats, for reasons only known to themselves, pilot these little vehicles that battle. And what makes the game interesting is it is freemium. Which right there, it kind of has a strike against it for me usually, but I'm finding this game very enjoyable. I haven't paid any money on it yet. So you're immediately asked to start building some kind of a vehicle. These are these crazy little animated vehicles, and you started with some kind of a shell, a chassis, if you will. And they're all kinds of strange shapes. Some of them are round, some of them are, like a wedge. Some of them are these giant, almost like siege tower shapes. And on these are what I would call hard points, little medium and heavy points on there that you can attach wheels and weapons and support systems to your vehicle. And then the vehicles fight. Now, while they're fighting, and it's an arena and it's one-on-one, it's a side animation thing. It's not 3D. And so your vehicle goes at it. The game has its own set of physics that it's reasonably true to, but it's not based in a lot of reality. But it won't take you long to figure it out. And there's different bits you can put on here, and you can win in different ways. So basically, the vehicles fight each other, and there's some kind of neat tiebreaker technology. So my vehicle might have sort of this giant spinning club on it. Someone else's vehicle might have some drills. A third guy's might have some lasers on them. And basically, the vehicles automatically battle. So you'll watch as his laser fires and your club smashes at his vehicle. And if you kill the other guy's vehicle first, then you win. If for some reason you both become incapacitated or can't kill each other fast enough, the walls become electric and start closing in, and the first vehicle destroyed is the winner. So this lends us some interesting tactics. You can be the guy who tries to just destroy the other guy's vehicle outright. You can build sort of a defensive vehicle that sort of gets to the center and repels the enemy until the walls crush him. Or you can push the other guy into the walls and crush him. There's a lot of different options here, and there's different wheels you can upgrade. There are lots of different kinds of weapons you can get. You can upgrade your weapons. Now, where the game gets you is that to upgrade each item, to merge them and make them more powerful, it costs coins, and you only get a certain number of coins per day, and you can only open boxes every 2 hours. And so if you don't mind playing it sporadically, the game's pretty fun. But if you want to really have the game, if you're one of those people who can't wait around and want to level up in the game very quickly, you're going to be sort of drawn into spending money, and that's where the game gets you. But I've played it now. I don't know, my daughter and I are playing it on a trip on the airplane, and then we played it while we're walking around, and just having fun with it. And it's a neat little game. I think it's well done. It's sort of different than what you play most of the time. So check it out. That is C.A.T.S. C.A.T.S. on iOS.
Thank you for listening to another scintillating edition of App of the App, a segment in which,
hey, less of that, more just getting on with the show.
Seriously, Wakeland, you are like school in summer. No class.
Hey, welcome back. And we figured since we have the professor of games himself on the show, Geoff, is that
a title and so apt?
It is. It is very apt. So, Geoff, do you when you teach board gaming, now
Yes.
which university do you have the classes on board gaming at?
That would be NYU, New York
NYU.
University.
So you teach
A little known local university,
right? A small subtle college.
a small community college.
Right. So Geoff, what are the title of the various courses you teach there? What would they? Be?
Well, right now I just teach one course, which is entitled provocatively Board Game Design.
Oh,
So you're trying to hide it in the catalog, then.
Right.
Although it started out as it's actually mostly a graduate level course. So they have the NYU Game Design Lab, and so it's mainly for video games, but it's a full 2-year program for an MFA degree.
Wow.
And but the kids have to take one semester, really a full year of game design which is just sort of general game design, although they do a lot of, basic game literacy and stuff like that. And then I'm an elective above that. So I'm for people that theoretically have already taken 1 or 2 semesters of game design and want to learn a little bit more, or perhaps even specialize in as a career, the board game design field.
Interesting. So is there an undergraduate program for game design, and then you are the graduate level?
Yeah, and actually this year as an experiment, we've been allowing the BFA students, the bachelor students, into the board game design class as well. So that's been a little bit challenging for me. This is my second time teaching the course. The first time was all graduate students. This time it's mixed, about half undergrad and half graduate student. And it actually is amazing the different levels of experience and quality of product and the designs that they do and stuff like that. There is a notable difference. So it's interesting trying to balance everything so that it's kind of fair to all the students.
So you're saying you're implying the graduate students are building stronger, more complex designs than the undergrads, or are the graduate students kind of burnt out and the undergrads have the creativity?
No. The graduate students are, and they're all into doing really interesting, kind of experimental type games.
Okay.
About relationships and people meeting and, just different higher level stuff. Whereas
Persona 5, right? It's like all like I'm in high school and I'm dating situation.
Exactly. Yes. They're all trying to use games to change the world. Right. And the bachelor students are just trying to look for a course to, just to blow off a little steam when they're not taking calculus.
I get it. Okay. That makes sense. So it's like a cheap elective. So do you go in there and be like, are you like the hardcore professor and you're like, I know you're taking this as an elective, you undergrads, and think this is going to be an easy A, but let me tell you right now, this is hardcore. Is that how it goes?
I can see it. I can see it now.
Right.
Well, I'm a little sad to say that is actually true.
I knew it.
Yeah, I have, and I apologize if any of these students are listening to this. I have a student in the class that I pretty sure is taking it just, that they felt that it was just going to be, sort of a blow-off class for them.
Right.
Just something a little fun to fill out the schedule for the semester. Right. And, we hit the ground running, talking, doing probability and talking about psychology and talking about all these different mechanics. And they have to design like 3 games in 8 weeks and, all this stuff. So it's taken very, very seriously by me and by most of the students. And, but they've all come up to speed. I mean, even the ones that came in, that it was sort of like a splash of cold water have kind of come around and enjoyed it.
Right.
I think, except for the ones who dropped the class.
Right. Do you say things like it's
who are dead to me?
It's no accident that differential equations is a prereq, right? Dead to me. That's
you
awesome.
Call yourself Mr. Wonderful, Professor Wonderful.
I don't know what to. I don't. That's actually a really big problem because every once in a while they'll like be professor, and it's just like I have no idea who the heck they're talking about. I just turn around, I look behind me, and it's just been a big shock and. So I don't know, but I don't want them to just call me Geoff because I'm not really the hip young professor that hangs out with the students.
Do you wear the sports coat with the patches on the sleeves? Because I feel like you have to do that if you want to go by your first name.
Oh, you know it. That was first day training.
That's right.
They brought us in for orientation.
Do you have a boatman's cap?
Yes, I do.
That's awesome. So Geoff, what has it been like? I mean, what's been sort of some of the things? What have been some of the big surprises? Now, this is the second year you've been doing this, or the third?
This is the second year.
Second year,
yeah,
right.
Second year, and and it's been interesting because actually, the one who taught this class before me was Rob Davio. From those of you who don't know Rob, he used to work at Hasbro and he designed things like Pandemic Legacy and Seafall and Betrayal at House on Hill and stuff like that. So he was much more, I think, qualified, shall I say, to teach this class perhaps than I am.
Wow.
Certainly he was bringing a different perspective because he brought a lot of the mass market stuff, working at Hasbro and stuff like that. So me walking into that, I got his curriculum and stuff like that. But, it's for all of the talking that I do about games and stuff like that on ludology and stuff, I've got, probably 200, 300 hours worth of podcast content out there talking about design, actually teaching somebody from, a standing start of how to design a game and all the different pieces that you have to do is a really challenging task. Plus you want them to design games, but the reality is that a decent board game design takes a long time, certainly longer than a semester.
Right.
Even if we only did one project and started from the very beginning, which you can't really afford to do. So, now we just started our final projects, and it's just hard. Now they've kind of got all the tools in hand, and they've got 6 weeks to do their final project, which is not much. The Fog of War took me 14 years to design.
Right.
Dragon and Flagon was 2 years and stuff like that. So it's trying to compress it in there and set expectations for people, but at the same time, just trying to explain to them, hey, look, the part of the game design you're doing now, that's the easy part. Right. That first 4 weeks on a game design when everything is great and lovely and everything works and you don't worry too much about balance and the details and, it's just all ideas and crazy stuff and see what sticks to the wall. That's a great part. But that last, like any project, that last 20%
is all the time.
Can take a huge amount of time and a huge amount of, just drudge work and iteration, stuff like that. And I'm a teeny bit concerned that the students aren't really getting to see that in the context of this course. And I try to convey that, but it's hard to do.
Yeah, it sounds interesting though. I mean, so do you get a lot of? Has the class really sort of grown? Is it getting a lot of interest? Because it sounds like the school's mostly oriented towards, digital games. So do people come in kind of expecting the board game side to be sort of a side thing, or do they see the convergence sometimes of the board game patterns in video games, or do they sort of like is there a respectable for the board game side, or is it kind of like, oh, this is kind of like the easy class because it's board gaming and video games much more complex? Or is there any of that? Is there any kind of rivalry or preconceived notions?
I think it's a little bit of both. You get different kids that have different perspectives. I've got some kids there that they want to pursue board games as their career. That's what they want to try to do, and they want to design it, and that's their first love. Most of the kids, though, are really into the video games, and certainly that's where, there's more jobs that are available. It's going to be a lot easier for them, graduating and going into that industry.
Sure.
But, the full first year of classes, they even when you start in any of the video game classes, they start by, the game design concepts are taught with board games. It's not, you can't sit somebody in front of a computer and say, okay, program it and do it. You got to mess around with paper and cards and stuff like that. And there is definitely a recognition that a lot of these design techniques can be used effectively in games, in video games. And, there's a lot of the stuff that I teach is broadly applicable to video games as well. So cool. I think it cuts across for everybody, that it's hopefully helpful in some fashion.
Now, are they ever surprised? Because I know many come from video game side, so maybe it's not as surprising. Are they surprised at how much math and statistics and things are involved in game design, or are they kind of like know that coming in?
I think they are to a certain extent. But I mean, a lot of them also are doing video games. So, they're doing a lot with Unity and with, Unreal Engine. So it's all about, vectors and matrix transformations and stuff like that. So, but that's math in sort of a different way.
Right.
But I think they don't realize that it's as much of a craft as it is. And that, we spend a lot of time developing what I call the toolkit, the designer toolkit, which is just going through different types of mechanics and different types of things that they can insert. And, like a lot of them had never heard of a push your luck game.
Right.
And what is that? And when would you use that? Or, what are some of the subtleties of, when you're trying to make a cooperative game of some of the key things in that, like, you want to, in a cooperative game, you want to decouple your victory from your obstacles.
Right.
Things like that. So, yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff like that. And I get the opportunity to introduce them to a lot of games that they're not familiar with and bring them in. Some of the older games and some of the pure titles and some of the, more classic games in the genre that I love so much, like the original Knizia Lord of the Rings or Modern Art or, a lot of the old Knizia stuff that they've never seen. We just played Ink and Gold in the last class when we were doing Push Your Luck, and nobody had ever played it before in the whole class.
Oh, nice.
Which just kind of blew me away.
So you're kind of bringing like game history as well as your experiences to the students. That's awesome.
Yeah, a little bit of it. But I think the thing that they enjoy the most is the practical stuff of it. We did a lot of, as I brought in some of my early prototypes that were going on and showed them, which I guess we'll maybe talk about a little bit, but the Expanse game that they've been doing, and Pit Crew, I've been brought in prototypes. I've showed them, look, here's what I just got from the publisher. Here's a sample of, the type of contract that comes out of this. This is the costs that we're getting from the manufacturer that shows that this is how much it costs to make a deck of cards, and this is how much it costs to make a box, and a lot of that stuff they don't know anything at all about. And that stuff they just I think, eat up even more than the game theory stuff, just the real practical nuts and bolts of what it's like to be, designing stuff on a day-to-day basis.
That's awesome. Have you given them
and
the
then
Kickstarter?
The biggest conversation we had, which they loved, was I said, we talked about dealing with reviews and criticism online. We had a whole class on a whole hour on that, talking about that.
That's a good one. Well, that probably applies to anything you do, right? Any creation form of creation on the internet.
Probably worse for video game designers.
I would think so.
Well, I think they're a little bit more anonymous. I think it's a little bit less personal because I guess if you're an indie guy, it's a smaller group. But if you're working at an EA or something like that, it's such a huge team that I think it's different. But yeah, my big advice was, I asked them. We started the class conversation. It's like, okay, here's a review, and how would you respond to this? And they talked about it. I do this, or I just point this out, or say, I was like, you're all wrong. I didn't shout wrong. I should have just shouted wrong.
Wrong.
I was like,
you should have.
Wrong. Say nothing. You do nothing. You do not respond to it in any way.
Do not engage.
Do not engage.
Right. That was my advice. I said, if somebody makes a rules error, you can jump in. Other than that, just stay out of it.
Stay out of the opinion, right?
Yep.
No good can come of that, right?
No good will come of it at all.
Well, Geoff, you mentioned I definitely wanted to hear about your teaching. It sounds like, has there been like one moment that's been really rewarding though? Like, what's been the most rewarding part so far, being a professor of game design?
Just the fun part, I think, has just been seeing just some of the final projects that I saw last year and the ones that I'm starting to see, come and shape together this year.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely some that have absolutely the potential to be published. And I actually, in the first semester, connected some of the kids with some potential publishers, and they've actually been working with some on that. So, that's been pretty neat.
Does Bonacore
great ideas to just steal?
Does Bonacore come into your classroom in disguise?
I think there's a movie.
I made all the students
wasn't
sign
DOA
a
that wasn't that the plot of
when they came in? Yeah,
that was the plot of the movie DOA from the 80s.
Oh, really? I'll have to check that one out.
Only it was an author, not a game designer, but it's a cool.
Sure.
2000s spin.
Right. All your designs belong to the professor.
That's right.
That's awesome. So, Geoff, speaking of designs belonging to someone else, no, this actually belongs to you. But sort
nice
of
segue.
I was weak, I admit.
That's pro-level segue right there.
So,
my head is spinning.
So, you mentioned The Expanse, and of course, Craig and I are huge fans of the show. And so when you initially sort of hinted once in an email long ago to me that you might be working on an Expanse, I was like, oh my God, that is so cool. One of my favorite game designers doing something in one of my favorite universes. Let's talk a little bit about that. How did you get involved with the Expanse board game project?
Okay, well, I was contacted actually over the summer by Zev from Z-Man Games. Well, he founded Z-Man Games originally, and now he has left there, and he's actually working with WizKids. And I've known Zev for a long time. He was a publisher at Z-Man. He owned Z-Man when we did the Ares project with him. So I worked with him very closely on that, and he lived in the local area for a while, so he was always a fixture at our local cons and stuff like that. So I've known him for years. And just out of the blue, he just contacted me, I think it was like in August, and said, we got 2 licenses that we got, and I would love for you to do one of them as a game. But the stipulations were A, you can only pick one, and B, it needs to be done by like November. Wow. Which was like 12 weeks away. And as I said, the fog of war took me 12 years. So I was a little bit concerned about that. But one of the licenses was The Expanse. The other one, I can't say what it is yet because they haven't announced it yet.
Sure.
But I will say that I did actually, I was just totally back and forth because I was super excited about the other one as well. Mm-hmm. The other one was a movie license. But I read most of the Expanse books and was a huge fan of those as well. So I fired off an email to one person that I thought might be able to help me make that decision, and that was Mr. Russ Wakelin.
Because that head's not big enough already.
No, I don't claim any responsibility, but I just was, and this was right at the time. I think Expanse had been renewed, but the second season hadn't aired yet, right? So we weren't sure. Right. And the first season was good, but we didn't really know if it was going to be great. But I think anybody would have given the same advice, Geoff. Expanse is just such a hot book and book season, and turned out second season got even better. So I think you made a wise choice.
Yeah, in the end, I was happy with it. So,
Now, when you were making that decision, though, did you think about the? You only had 12 weeks. Did you immediately get sort of like mechanic ideas as you thought about the Expanse? Like, what were you thinking? Like, what was the essence of the books? Because I'm guessing you were relying more on the books because there's more material there than at the show at that time. What was the essence of the books that you really wanted to capture in a game? Like, Game of Thrones is all about political intrigue. Is the Expanse a similar sort of thing? What's the essence of it?
Yeah, well, that was one of the really interesting parts was that I had, first off, the license was based on the TV series, not on the books. And there were little subtle differences there. Yeah. And you couldn't do stuff in the game based on the books that hadn't yet happened in the TV show, which is a whole other story.
Right.
Right away when Zev said the Expanse in that email to me, I was like, I just kind of had a vision for the game in terms of the intrigue and the ships flying over the solar system and the heroes and all the different things that go into that. Whereas the other one was probably going to be more like a hidden traitor kind of a game. And I won't say any more about that. But the first one I had a much clearer vision on what it would be. The second one I wasn't quite as sure what form it would take in a game that would properly represent it. So that was another thing that helped in the decision. But in addition to saying, then when I went back and asked for more details, which I thought was interesting also, I got very clear direction from WizKids about what they wanted. They said, okay, it can have minis.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's, it had to be like a family-ish game, not a family game, but like not a super heavy,
right.
3-hour game. Right. And they gave me a price point, that they wanted to hit for the retail. And so that really right away put me into, couldn't make Twilight Imperium again, which is what I was hoping to do. So,
well, I would like to thank WizKids in advance for not doing that. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So now so what was the essence of what you came up with? I mean, I want to ask you this though. So you're limited to the show. Did they give you early access to season 2? Like, how did you know what you're going to be able to work within, or did you have limited information?
Well, this was pretty neat. Yeah, they did give me access to season 2. So actually, WizKids, just coincidentally, their headquarters is located here in New Jersey, not too far from my house, near the airport. And they had the scripts there for season 2, at least the first half of season 2. And so I made arrangements to go over to their office, and I got to read the scripts back in September while they were even filming some of the episodes at that point.
That's cool.
So that was really cool. I'd never actually really read a TV script before. So it was very different for me just to go in. And then, of course, I go in there. They took my phone. They took my phone away. They locked me in a room. Everything was like, watermarked, all of the scripts. And, so I had to read them on a special computer. Wow. I was allowed to take notes. They didn't check my notebook on the way out, but it was fun. So I went in there for a few hours and, read through all the scripts and took some notes about some of the characters that popped up and some of the ones that were more prominent in the series than they were in the books and stuff like that. So that was a pretty neat experience. And it was actually interesting later when the show actually started airing in February to go see, I could watch the first 5 or 6 episodes that I had read the script for and started to see like what I had pictured in my mind versus what was, on the screen and the way they described the action and stuff like that.
Were there any moments after you saw the show that you're like, oh crap, I misinterpreted the script? Or were you pretty close?
I was pretty close, but I think, because I'd read the books too, but I was surprised. I don't know if you guys have read scripts, but I was surprised at how florid the language was. Like it's, when they were describing, some of the lines, even like, like he's reading it like a hero that just got, or like a cat that just got dragged out of a pool after, whatever, just stuff like just very, very vivid descriptive text that's never going to be, it's not just, really describing the action or something like that.
Those script writers are artistic too, man. They got to somehow get their little, their Shakespeare out.
I guess so. Yeah. Exit pursued by bear. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. That was always my favorite part of any script writing class was when the professor would be like, you need to be more evocative. And as an actor, I would be like, no, you don't.
Yeah, I figured that they would just leave it up as interpretation, but they really didn't. They were pretty clear about what they, when somebody was being sarcastic or when they were being whatever. So it was, I thought that was really
very elaborate. Yes.
That's awesome. So, so you got early access to the script. That's pretty cool. Did you get any cool consultations? Did you get to meet with anybody who worked on the show or the authors or anything?
Yeah, I actually, I had some questions about the kind of the universe and some of the things that was going on. And because originally what I wanted to do, my original concept, because, aim big, right? Shoot for the stars.
Sure,
and,
of course.
And then dial it back later. So originally what I kind of wanted to do, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Coin series of games. Counterinsurgency. There's been one on Afghanistan. There's been one on the Gallic Wars with Caesar. There's been a whole series of games about counterinsurgency. And one of the Afghanistan and Middle East. One of the things that's really, really interesting about them is that they're typically 4 players, and that's what we were targeting for with this. So the Earth, so the UN, the MCR, Mars, and the OPA and Protogen are the 4 factions. And what I really wanted to have was 4 very, very different victory conditions that they had to do, and with shifting alliances. And sometimes they'd have to work with other people to kind of get it. And like the OPA and Protogen would try to be increasing the tension and moving things more towards war, and Mars and UN have to try to dial it back. But at the same time, Mars and the UN were conflicting over control of the belt bases. And so I kind of wanted that kind of a feel. But I was actually having difficulty figuring out a lot of the actual political end games for some of the powers. It's sort of hinted at in the books and the shows, but like, what does Mars really want and what does Earth really want? What would they consider to be a win condition? I wasn't 100% sure about that.
You asked the authors that, and they let you put that in the game with a giant spoiler?
No, I actually ended up backing away from that idea a little bit. I couldn't really get it to work right. But another idea that I had also was to have the planets moving around the sun.
Oh, that's cool.
And so like when Mars and Earth were really close to each other, it might be easier to launch, fleets in between.
Oh, sort of like older school war games where you take advantage of the season. You'd be taking advantage of the orbits.
Right. And they actually did that in Buck Rogers in the 25th century.
Yes, I remember that.
The 80s did that and moved the planets around, right?
Yep.
And so, so that was one of the questions I had also was about travel times and, how long it takes to get places and, which bases were really occupied, because it was a little bit vague sometimes about like whether Phoebe was occupied and, all these different things and different locations of the galaxy. And so I sent all these questions off to Zev, and the author came back and they answered some of them and said, actually, plus I have a whole list. We have whole binders full of like places and resources and what's where and who's got which base and all this other stuff. And I was like, that would be great. And so we ended up actually just setting up a phone call with one of the authors, Ty Frank, which was a lot of fun to talk to him about it. And it was interesting because he had very, very specific ideas of what he wanted the game to be like, which I liked. Close? I was happy about.
Oh, that's good. Now,
that could have gone either way.
Were you locked in at that point?
Depended on the game that he wanted. The game that he wanted was very close to the game that I wanted to make.
Oh, that's good.
What a happy coincidence.
So that's good.
But one of the things he said he didn't want is he didn't want it to be super scripted. He didn't want it to just be the book all over again.
Right.
You wanted to kind of set up the forces, set up the different tensions, set up, the objectives, and then just let it loose and just let the
game tells a story.
Go.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
And don't like railroad it that you got to like hit certain plot points and things to happen and stuff like that. So that's cool. The way that we that work.
Very cool.
And did he help you with the win conditions?
Not as much. We talked about it a little bit, but in the end, I decided that it was getting too complicated, especially for a family audience, to have everybody have a little bit different rules and different things they're trying to do. Right. So I kind of backed away from it. One thing he told me, which was interesting, and I probably shouldn't tell this story, but
you're gonna, because you're Jeff and we're the D6 generation.
Right. So
and Charlie is right outside.
We love you, man.
So he told me. So I asked him about I had the question about the travel times, right? How long does it take?
Yeah.
I said, I can't really figure it out. Is it how long does it take to get from here to Saturn? Because I wanted the planets to move, but I wanted it to make sense in terms of the whole context of how fast the ships moved around. And he said to me, he said, well, actually, he says, we have very deliberately never, ever said how long things take in like all 6 books.
Wow.
He said we deliberately obscure that information because we know we just basically he didn't say it this way, but he basically said they don't want to have to deal with nerd rage. Yeah. He said they want to have the flexibility to put this person over here and put this person over here and have them come together and not have everybody freak out about it by saying, oh, the most they can go is warp factor 7 and it's this far away and the planets were in conjunction. And so he said they just sidestep the issue and they never ever say how long it actually takes to travel anywhere.
So to paraphrase Joss Whedon, all the ships are moving at the speed of plot.
Exactly. The ships move exactly as fast as they need to, no faster and no slower.
Exactly.
So I left
awesome.
that idea on the cutting room floor also. But it was interesting to hear him say that. I thought that was an interesting insight that they took it to that. They actually thought about that and planned that. I thought it's kind of a smart thing to do rather than just decide in book 3, we better not deal with this anymore because we're going to get ourselves into trouble.
I think that's pretty smart. So they must have like a little rule whenever they're writing together. Does that sound like we're putting a time in there? Okay, cut that. Switch that a little bit.
Right.
So where did
be
you
a little more vague here?
So where did you end up, Geoff? How would you pitch now? Like sort of we all know what the Expanse. I think most of our listeners have watched the show. They know the premise of the show. It's they get that part. But so what's the pitch for the game experience of the Expanse? Where'd you land?
Well, so because of the time constraints on the design, I felt that I needed to, what was that word I used before? Steal, that was the word.
Purloin.
I was not going to be able to come up with something that was just, totally from first principles and come up with something that was working. So I needed to take sort of a proven chassis and you've got 4 factions. And one of the really interesting things about the Expanse that I like about it is it's sort of space opera, but there's not really a lot of battles. There's a lot of posturing, A lot of people are threatening to do stuff. There's a lot of fleets that are like firing warning shots and people are redeploying.
It's very Bay of Pigs. Very Bay of Pigs, the whole season.
It's very Bay of Pigs. And the whole thing, so the whole thing always felt to me like the Cold War.
Right.
And so where do you turn to if you want to do a game about the Cold War, but Twilight Struggle?
Aha! You stuck Twilight in, though. See, you couldn't do Twilight Imperium. So you went for another Twilight game. I see how you did that.
Yes. I tried to take inspiration from the movie Twilight, but sadly...
Oh, God. Yeah, that would have been bad.
Sadly, that is not as applicable.
Right.
Glittering proto-molecule monsters.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So I kind of started with Twilight Struggle and said, okay, I like this idea. And it really works for a licensed game, too, because, you can have all these events on the cards and you can, they want to have room for the license to be expressed. People are buying this game to be in the world of the Expanse. So, just having Mars and, Io and Ganymede on a map isn't enough. You need to have the characters. You need to have some of the special events, things like that. So having a whole deck of cards, it really works well. So, so where we ended up was taking the Twilight Struggle system and extending it into a multiplayer type regime. So, normally that's just a 2-player game.
Right.
And the key thing is that if you every card can either be used for an event that's on the card, which is key to the picture and the flavor text, or each card is also rated for points, and you can just use action points to do anything you want if the event doesn't really fit what you want to do. But if you choose to do the action points, then the other player gets to do the events. And also there are some events that you just can't do, which also fits nicely thematically. So what I ended up doing was having it so that if you choose not to do the event or you're unable to do the event, then there's a list. There's a list of all the factions that can do a particular event, and then there's a ranking of which one is at the top of the list and has first shot at doing it down to the bottom. But if you choose to, so then you just go down the ranking, say, do you want to do it? Do you want to do it? Do you want to do it? And whoever does it moves to the bottom of the list. So they lose their priority and they're at the bottom of the list.
So you're trying to, so it's like a little bit of a push your luck. You're trying to wait for the right moment.
You don't know what cards are coming up, although there is a track similar like Small World-ish or Through the Ages. There's a track of cards, and it's easiest to take. You have to spend the fewest. You have to pay victory points to take the cards if you want to take cards further down, deeper into the track. So the first card is free, and then after that, you have to spend a couple of victory points. So you have some idea what's coming up.
So it's like drug dealing. The first one's free.
Oh, yes. Yeah, sure. First card's free, but if you want that second card, you got to wait for it to slide down to the corner. I don't know. I've lost track of the metaphor.
Down the corner. Oh, jeez.
That sounds pretty cool. So how did you do? So it sounds like the cards
really. Sorry.
It sounds great. It sounds like the cards really capture the characters, right? So your Naomis, your Amoses, your Holdens, and things like that are going to be in the card deck someplace, right? I would assume.
Well, sort of. Actually, the Rocinante is a whole different thing.
Okay.
So for those that have seen the show, the Rocinante is sort of the main characters flying around on a ship. Right. And one of the interesting things about the Rocinante, and actually this is one of the things that I absolutely cleared by the authors. Yeah. Because I was a little worried about this. But from my reading of the book, the Rocinante is sort of it's sort of switches sides a lot.
Oh yeah, it's in the middle.
They're not even really sure who they're working for. Like in the beginning of the game, I said the original, we now have a variable setup. In the beginning fixed setup, they started controlled by the protogen player.
Yes.
Because I felt thematically they were actually the stuff they were doing, even though Holden thinks that it's the right thing to do, is actually playing into the hands of.
Well, in several of the books, I mean, spoiler alert, we should be careful here, but in several of the books, the protogen definitely exudes influence over Holden and his crew, right? I mean, many.
Right.
But then
I think Russ is Russ is conflating protogen and the proto-molecule, but same thing.
But it is sort of. But then there's also the but all the factions control them one time or the other. So it kind of reminds me of how in the Conan Barbarian board game, Conan moves from player to player, right? Because he's kind of like always a problem, or always out there doing things. So is the Rocinante more of like a neutral thing that people can gain control of periodically?
Yeah. So basically, the way that the game is working is that it's an influence control game. So there's 16 bases throughout the solar system. There's a couple on Earth, a few on Mars, and then some in the belt, and so on. And you're dropping in, most of the time you're dropping influence cubes. You're trying to get influence cubes on the bases, and at certain times scoring happens, and the person who triggers the scoring gets to pick which region on the board is going to be worth extra bonus points, and everything else is just with 1 point to whoever has the most.
Cool.
If it's not in the bonus. And then there's fleets that you can move around as well. But the fleets are, if you have the majority of fleets are in an orbital around a base, then you get an extra +1 influence on that base. But some orbitals, like the Jupiter orbital, there's like 3 bases at Jupiter. So if you have the most fleets in Jupiter, you get an extra influence on all of the Jupiter bases.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And the Rocinante basically is, in the beginning of the game, it goes to the person that moves last. So so initially it's controlled by them, and it counts as an extra fleet for them for all purposes. And then I talked about the scoring rounds. Well, let me back up for the events. So this was a really system that I was added later on in the design, but I think really is pretty neat. Is there's a lot of events that it'll say, like, if you've got the majority of fleets here, you can do this, or add 3 influence into the Jupiter system or stuff like that, where it may not be so great for you to do right away, or everyone can react to it. So what you can do is, if you want to pay a victory point, instead of doing an event, you can just save it and do it later.
Ooh.
Instead of taking a regular turn. Or when there's a scoring that's triggered, and there's scoring cards that come up on that track I talked about. Right. So when somebody chooses to take the card off the track, they secretly pick which is going to be the bonus sector. But then going around in a circle, each person gets to pick a saved event that they have if they want to do it right at that point before scoring. So it gives you a little extra chance to kind of influence things, which can be nice and tense, and it gives another advantage to the person that picks the scoring, because they lose their turn to pick the scoring, but they get to go last on that event. But if you have the Rocinante, instead of using one of your saved events, if you don't have any saved events, the Rocinante has 4 special events. It's got a Holden event, an Amos event, and the other 2 characters, Alex and the woman whose name escaped me in the moment. Starts with an N. Naomi, thank you. Yes, Naomi, the Naomi event. And they're very thematic with them. Like Amos just gets to blow up lots of stuff. And
of course he does.
Holden gets to send influence anywhere and stuff like that. So, and then at the end of the scoring round, the Rocinante moves to the player that's in last place in terms of victory.
Oh,
points.
Nice. So they're kind of like a catch-up mechanic as well as being
a little bit
cool.
of a catch-up mechanic, yeah. And we spin it in the rules that Holden likes the underdog.
Yes, well, he does, kind of, because he kind of preserves balance, in the end, mostly.
Yes, he likes to preserve the balance in the force. So so that's the way the Rocinante did. So that worked really nicely thematically, and it also works really nicely from a gameplay standpoint, because it gives a little bit of a kick to the person that's running in last place, but not a huge major advantage.
Well, what are some other examples of some cool, sort of elements of the show sneaking in? Is there a Christian sort of card somewhere in there?
Well, each faction there has a leader. So Avasarala is the leader of the UN.
Cool.
And that was another thing I had to find out from the authors is who's the leader of Mars, because he's never named in the books at all. So I had to find that out. But there's also special faction abilities. So each faction gets a starting power in the beginning. So the UN can take cards off the track and pay less victory points. They can take from the first 2 slots without paying, for example. And Mars gets these special giant battle cruisers that are worth 2 fleets when they're in orbit instead of 1.
Oh, very cool.
And it takes 2 damage to blow them up. So everyone's got special things. The Protogen people can keep events for free. Their ability is called Puppet Masters. So they get to just keep as many events as they want to try to manipulate stuff. So there's a lot of these kind of fun little things. And then each time there's a scoring round, you have a deck of tech cards, and you get an additional tech at each scoring that adds to the abilities that you've got.
Oh, neat.
So the factions continually get more and more differentiated as they go on, and the game also gets bloodier and bloodier. It's a lot hard. It's hard to attack fleets in the beginning, but by the end, every faction has gotten an ability that lets them just use action points to start going after people at will. So
Nice.
that was also a fun way to add sort of an arc to it.
Oh, that's very cool.
And the whole thing is like 60 minutes, 75 minutes.
Nice. So it plays fast. It's 4 players.
nice.
How's the bling quotient here, Jeff? Are people who are into lots of little cool blinged out games going to have some stuff here to get excited about?
There's going to be, I have not actually physically held the components in my hands yet. I've seen them, but the influence is wooden cubes.
Oh, that's cool.
The ships are these fun. They're actually discs that have the fleet symbol printed on them. Which and they look really nice. The whole map, the artist did a terrific job. It looks everything in the game looks like the control panels and all the displays and the dashboards and stuff like that you see in the TV show.
That's cool.
So he really did a nice job adapting that. So it looks really nice out on the table, and the cards have great art. All of the stills. They pulled a lot of stills from the TV series. From all through things, so everything has got really dynamic shots on them and really captures the flavor of what's going on. So I was happy with the way the whole thing came out. We did have one little issue. I will tell one more story, which is seriously I'm never gonna get another commission from WizKids ever again. But so again, a teeny bit of a spoiler, but it's out there. It's been on the show already. But there is a creature in the show called the hybrid.
Right.
Okay. And, they even, one of the questions I had, because the hybrid actually hadn't come in yet in the scripts that I read. Right. So when I was talking to the authors, I was like, well, how far actually does it go to the end of season 2? Because the game's supposed to cover through the end of season 2. So I want to know which characters were in it and stuff like that. And the hybrid was right on their list. Right. And it's such a major thing that happens. I really wanted to include that as an ability. And the hybrid's ability, I was super excited about. Basically, you point to a planet, you flip a card, and you look at the number of action points on it, and that's the number of influence cubes that get blown up. And if it's a scorecard, everybody just dies.
Oh, wow. Nice. So it's just a total random sort of like, oh, crap event. That's awesome. I love it.
Right. And but I got the artwork back from the artist. I got all the cards, and all the cards were had pictures on them, except that the hybrid one was the wrong picture. It was a picture of Julie Mao, like covered in alien goo.
Oh yeah,
right, that's goo. Not it.
And I was like, no, that's not the hybrid. That's her. And they was like, oh, okay. So they go back, second iteration, a bunch of other fixes too. That was just one of them. Comes back, same picture. I pointed out again. Comes back third time, same picture. And so finally I go back to the artist. I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. What's happening? And Zev jumps in and he's like, well, he said the hybrid is their big reveal of what the hybrid looks like, is their big reveal for season 2. This was like back in January or February. And they said they don't want to release to you any pictures because it may get out. They don't want to give us any pictures of the hybrid. Even though, the game's not coming out till after the season is completely over and we know that the hybrid is going to be in it.
Right, yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, we came up with some other ideas for pictures. I rejiggered the name of it about like throwing a rock at a planet. I called Drop a Rock was the alternate card.
Drop a rock, right?
Which I, thought might work. And so we finally put everything to bed. And I'm watching the newest episode of The Expanse.
There it is.
And in the last 3 minutes, the hybrid walks onto the screen.
And you're like, darn it.
So I immediately called Zev. I'm like, can we put it on now? Can we get a picture of the hybrid now? I just saw it on my TV. He's like, let me get back to you. And so, yeah, we got a picture of the hybrid.
Good.
And put it on the cover.
Oh, good.
But if they just told us, we don't want to release it to you until this date, if you haven't gotten a press by then, you can include it. It would have been fine, but nobody ever said that. It was always just like, no.
Right.
No hybrid for you. So
that's funny.
In general, it's been terrific working on a license. It's just the first licensed game that I've worked on. And the game went to them and they made some suggestions and we tweaked some things, but nothing that was, so horrible. I've heard some horror stories about licensees, and in general, I've had nothing but a real positive experience. The authors are really on board with the game. They tweeted about it, which was really neat and fun. It was just, a great experience talking to the author about that. So it was pretty neat.
Cool. So when does the game come out, Geoff? It sounds awesome. When does it hit the streets?
It is scheduled to come out right now, I believe, around June. So hopefully in time for Origins.
Oh, sweet.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
But we will keep our fingers crossed.
So
right around the corner.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Certainly by Gen Con.
I'll be ordering one. Awesome. Oh, a huge fan of Space. And now you've also, before we run out of time here, you also isn't Pit Crew coming out like any day now?
Pit Crew has been, it's supposed to be coming out in May. So that will definitely also be at Origins. So, that is my simplest game I've ever done. So that's a new thing for me, but it teaches in like 5 minutes and it plays in like 15 minutes. And it's just a quick little speed game about, getting your car back out on the racetrack as quickly as possible. I love it. I'm super excited about it. It goes up to 9 players. It's another team-based game.
So Geoff, while playing that game, if I make air drill noises, do I get bonus points? Is there some kind of like mechanic for that?
I'll have to put that in.
I feel like there should be, because maybe the expansion, maybe audio.
Either that or your teammates will start throwing things at you.
Because I got to pick that up for my wife. She's an automotive journalist, and they're huge into racing.
I would vote for
that's a must grab.
Teammates throwing something at you,
or that.
I'm come on, Craig. Work with the reception that one came out, because that's like a really commercial little game. It's got sort of a NASCAR vibe to it.
Yeah,
but
that sounds fun.
It's just a lot of fun.
Nice,
cool.
Well, thank you, Geoff. I'm excited for Expanse. We'll keep an eye out for it coming out this summer, and we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about assaulting giants, or giants assaulting, or
I was going to say a giant game review.
Yes, there you go. A much better segue. Thank you.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, total fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy. And Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hey everyone, this is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can follow me on Twitter at Nicole Wakeland and check out my blog, TotalFangirl.com. Our shout out is to all of our wonderful supporters over at Patreon. Head to patreon.com/the D6 Generation and you too can support the show. So we have just arrived back from a week's vacation. And when I say just arrived back, we got back at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's when I got back to my house, and it is now 10 a.m. So I sound like I just got home at 2 a.m. and I have a cold, so apologies. So where we went was Disney World with the kids, which is really fun. And we went with Russ's brother and his wife and their kids, and we had a great time. And we stumbled upon something yesterday that I've heard about, but that I've never actually seen. And it was so cool that now my kids want to plan a time to go back and experience this, like for real, to see this and to dress up. So it's something called Dapper Day. And if you're a Disney fan, you've probably heard of Dapper Day. And it's dressing up all dapper, all nice. So all the men show up and they have, outfits that have like suspenders and hats. It's almost kind of sort of like a 40s kind of Dapper Day. The women have sort of retro outfits on, and they do all sorts of great costumes. Their hair's all done, and everyone gets very dressed up, and it's amazing, like to see all these really beautifully dressed people walking around in the Magic Kingdom. And it's bizarre. Normally you're like in, jeans and t-shirts, and you got Mickey ears on your head, and instead there's people with beautiful dresses and high heels and parasols to match. So it's kind of like the ultimate version of cosplay for like Disney fans, but it's not necessarily Disneyed. Like some people are truly dressed up in these beautiful outfits that they've created, and they're almost all custom outfits, although you can tell some of them are things that people may have just bought right off the rack. But the custom ones are the ones that are just absolutely amazing. They will put to shame the stuff that you'll see at Gen Con or Comic-Con or any of those things. They're incredible. And when they're the most fun is when people take a twist and they try and create, say, a Snow White or a Cinderella outfit, but it looks kind of like it's right out of the 40s. So unless you know that dress is supposed to be sort of a take on Cinderella, you don't know that that's what it is. So it's fun to watch all these people and to look at some of these costumes and think, okay, wait, I think she's this character. I think she's that character. And there was even I had two favorites that were just absolutely incredible. They showed up with poodle skirts, this whole family, like right out of the 50s. And all the guys in the group were dressed like milk delivery men, in the white shirts and the white pants, little black bow ties. But they each had on their poodle skirts, their father had hand painted their favorite character. And it was maybe about a foot tall and a couple inches appropriately wide. Hand painted onto each of these skirts their favorite characters, which I kind of thought, I'm like, well, there's a guy who probably has a hobby doing something with miniatures because he really was very talented. It was a painstaking thing. I took pictures of it. It was incredible. The other favorite one that wasn't a Disney, specifically your classic Disney one, although technically now they own it, was a Marvel themed group, and they did all the Marvel superheroes, but they made them look like greasers, like from Grease, like the Pink Ladies, and I can't think what the greaser group was, but those guys. So they all had jackets on, but instead of saying like all the women Pink Ladies, it would say Spider-Man, and it would say Black Widow, and there was one that was Tony Stark, a woman that was doing Tony Stark, and it said Stark Industries on the back. So it was really neat, and they pose. Everyone's always so happy to show off the work they've done. I guess they do this twice a year, and they do it in Disneyland, Disney World, and Disneyland Paris, but they do it in the spring and the fall, but in Disney World, they actually get a little bit more because it's gigantic there. They do Saturday, yesterday was the Magic Kingdom, and then today, Sunday, they're going to be doing it in Epcot, and they do the whole thing again come November, like the week before Thanksgiving. So I went to the park on our last day, just real quick, with my brother-in-law's wife, and we saw this, and I immediately said to my daughters, oh my God, you've got to see this. And my oldest was totally into it. Now she's making grand plans for the entire family to come back and cosplay as Disney villains with a Victorian slant. So we'll have to see. I mean, we've been back from vacation for roughly 6 hours. I don't know if I'm quite ready to plan another one, but if it was to fall on Dapper Day, that would be fantastic.
Hey, now it's time to talk about our friends at Geek Nation Tours. That would be geeknationtours.com, right? And, we really got to tell you guys, we just heard us chat with Mr. Engelstein. We see him, one of our favorite reasons to go to places like Gen Con. And, if you need to go to Gen Con, if you'd love to go to Gen Con, if you've always dreamed of going to Gen Con, and you've never
There's
been
really
before,
only one way to go to Gen Con. Literally only one way now.
At this stage, the problem you have today, let's say, you really want to go this year, you finally decided, I'm going to do it. Well, hotels are all booked. It's going to be impossible to get in there now. You're going to be staying 18 miles outside the city. Or you could book with Geek Nation Tours, guaranteed to get into a hotel that's attached right there. Get gaming early in. We'll get you down there early, hooked up with the Kentucky Fried Gamers, all these great events. You'll get special events to be able to hang out with people in the industry, see new games, check out their new stuff. Even some reprobates like us will be there running some crazy gaming events on the first
They've even
dinner.
got one thing where the makers of the role-playing game Your Zombie Survival Plan Will Fail. I think that's their tagline, not the title. But those guys will be with you. They'll be running an adventure, a role-playing adventure. Each member of the tour gets one of those rings that's a die that, spinny rings.
Yep.
That works as a die. And you get a percentile because apparently that game works on a percentile. And they're going to do a walking RPG session. And it's zombies take over Gen Con, and you have to make it back to your hotel alive.
That is awesome. So you don't want to miss any of that stuff.
Wicked cool. Just all kinds of cool stuff like that.
These are things that you can't, some of these things you can't do any other way. And Terrace just makes sure you get to all the right things, geeky things from beginning to end. And all these folks on the tour, we were just at their Adepticon tour. There are people now that go to Adepticon with Geek Nation Tours for years and years in a row now. And they've made best friends with these folks to go on the tour. And this is the only time of year they see them. And they just do it partly to go to the Adepticon, partly because Geek Nation Tours is fantastic, and partly because they made these fantastic friends by just doing Geek Nation Tours. There's no better way to see these things than through Geek Nation Tours. So
you'll be surrounded by people who love the things you love, who like to talk about the things you like to talk about. It's crazy.
Exactly. So head on over to geeknationtours.com.
You're listening to the Dice Tower Network at Dicetowernetwork.com. More fun than Merchant of Venus. Wait, what? Who writes these?
Hey, welcome back. And now we are going to discuss Assault of the Giants.
Excellent.
Oh, look at that, huh?
That was good echo. I like it.
Thank you. I like the rough voice too. Assault of the Giants.
Yeah, that was a good no. I'm glad you pointed that out because I almost missed it.
Yeah, no, that's about all I have to bring to the table today. But
no, you played the game, so I've played the game. I
have played the game once. That is true.
Well, I really wanted to review this game, and I'm actually excited, Geoff, you're here for this review because I think there's some pretty interesting mechanics going on here that I haven't quite seen before. But you are much more well versed in game mechanics, being a professor of gaming, as it were.
Sure.
I feel like, as we go through these, I'd love to hear from you, and you'll probably be like, that's the well-known Italian Ishanshi maneuver mechanic that we've all heard of. Yeah. So I'm looking for that kind of detail here so we can understand.
Okay. I will be your official annotator / footnoter.
Beautiful. Okay, great. So Assault of the Giants is a relatively new, and I say relatively like this past February, game from WizKids. Now, this confuses me because Wizards of the Coast. Now, Wizards of the Coast is not owned by WizKids, are they? Or did they get bought?
No, they are not.
Okay, so they're different companies, right? And Wizards of the Coast, of course.
See, he already paid for his
right. Already,
I could tell you that WizKids is actually owned by NECA, the New England Collectibles Association company that does like little figurines and stuff like that. But that's probably more than you want to know. So I will sit back.
You learn something new every day. Yeah. So they're a locally based company then, New England. Does that make sense? So anyway, so there's WizKids. Then there's Wizards of the Coast. Wizards of the Coast on Dungeons & Dragons. Wizards of the Coast also makes some great board games associated with Dungeons & Dragons, but then sometimes they farm them out to other people. In this case, so don't get confused because some of the D&D-based board games are Wizards of the Coast products, and some of the D&D-based board games are WizKid products, and there's still other D&D-based board games that other guys make too. So basically the license is all over the place, is what we're saying, right? This is 2017 from WizKids, and it was designed by Andrew Parks, who apparently is Jeff's neighbor. Is that right?
Yes, he actually lives. Yeah, he lives about 10 or 15 minutes from me.
There you go.
Yeah, we hang out all the time. Our daughters are like best friends. So,
there you go.
Yeah, so we will have lunch and such. So yes, I will claim my my friendship with Andy in the interest of full disclosure as I discuss the game.
So there's some partiality here that bias may occur. But in any case, designed by Andrew, and it's a 3 to 6 player game. And in this role, you're going to assume one of the factions of giants from the Dungeons and Dragons universe. So, yes. Craig, do you know off the top of your head, without cheating, all the factions of giants, the main factions of giants in the Dungeons and Dragons universe?
No.
Go.
No, I don't.
Jeff, do you know?
I can tell you. Ready? I do not have the show notes up. I got rid of them.
Okay, fair enough.
So, Storm.
Yes.
Hill.
Yes.
Fire.
Yes.
Ice.
Frost. Close. Yeah, we'll give it to you.
Frost. Yep. Okay, Frost.
Yeah,
that's 4, right? How many am I looking for?
You're missing the 2 others.
I'm missing 2 others.
Yes.
Beanstalk. Stone.
Beanstalk. Stone. Yes.
Stone.
Yes. And then Jeff's saying beanstalk, so you're 1 more away.
I'd like to phone a friend, not Jeff.
Not Jeff.
I don't remember.
Cloud. The 6th giant.
Cloud. That's
giant,
right. They were in Rapid Fire, right?
Yes.
Cloud.
Yes. The Cloud Giant. So there are 6 giant factions in Dungeons and Dragons.
I have to say, I really don't understand the Cloud Giants and the Storm Giants, but hey, whatever.
Yeah. That's why it was in my head.
It's a subtle thing. It's mostly alignment, honestly.
It's a giant thing.
It's an alignment thing.
It's very racist for you to say that all giants look like.
Wow. Okay, so moving on. So in any case, it is a 3 to 6 player game. You each control a faction of giants trying to take over. It's a dudes on the map, or dare I say giants on the map game, right? It is a play length is estimated to be 1 to 2 hours, which Craig and I have found. I have found that to be the case. I have found the game to. I haven't seen a game of this last over 2 hours. It's typically about one. I've actually played a 45-minute version of it too, so it's between 1 and 2 hours is pretty fair. Yep. A mistake may have been made in that game. More about that later. Also, retail price is
last night.
No. There was a mistake last night, a minor one.
You mean the one that lasted 45 minutes had a big mistake?
Yes, yeah. So the game is either $79.99 or, as Craig likes to say, $80. Or there's two flavors of the game. There's the normal version, and then there's, I think they call it the enhanced version, which is $130, but the enhanced version comes with pre-painted figures. And there are quite a few figures in the game box. There are 2 figures per giant faction, plus there are 3, as the giants call them, small folk, who are human giant hunters. And also, so you're going to be looking at essentially 12, 15 figures that would be pre-painted in the fancy version.
Yes.
So, Craig, do you think you can handle reading a dramatic reading here of what the fluff about Salt of the Giants is all about here?
Ready?
Yeah, go for it.
Cue echo.
Yes.
Anam, the All-Father, the eldest and greatest of the giant gods, has shattered the ancient caste system of the giants known as the Ordning, which throws all giant kind into chaos. Now, any giant with ambition can challenge the hierarchy, and no giant knows its place. Once the Ordning is undone, each giant race seeks to stand at the top of the new hierarchy. Because each giant race has a different view of how giants achieve greatness, each race has a unique goal to pursue in the game.
And there you have it, right? So you kind of have like a Greyjoy situation going on here, right? There's one death at the top, and now all the giants are fighting over who gets to be the new leader of the giant kind, right? Mm-hmm. Pretty classic situation. Making sense so far, Geoff? You with us here?
Yes, I am.
All right, excellent. Okay, good. So,
it doesn't say that Anam the All-Father died. It
no, he doesn't die.
He shattered the ancient caste system.
Yeah, he's just like time for new,
Why'd he do that? Why did he do that?
I don't know.
Why can't he do what? Why can't we all just get along?
It's a thing. It's a giant thing. So let's talk about, first of all, is there value there? Let's talk about what's in the box. So, Geoff, do you know what kind of sound it makes when you open a box full of giants? Any thoughts on that? That would be a hill giant farting. Is that what that is? That sounds about right.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, we'll go with it. So inside the box, you get a game board, which is in fact a reasonably colorful map of the Sword Coast. So if you are a fan of Dungeons & Dragons and you're playing in any of the older school campaigns or a lot of the new campaign books for 5th edition, you will immediately be right at home on the map of the game board. The Sword Coast is very prominent there. The spine of the world, all the major points that any fan of Dungeons & Dragons will be familiar with is right there on the map, all divided up into little sections. And so you can immediately see we're going to be fighting over the Sword Coast, right? Which is, that sounds about right. Chock full of tokens. It is a board game. There's lots of those. Art's pretty good. Token quality is pretty solid. Nothing to write home about, but they're nice. You do get a bunch of giant discs. So basically your dudes on the map can come in 2 flavors. The primary one, the one that you got the most of, are these round discs. They're actually the nicer pieces. They have nice artwork on them. They are still tokens, though, but they're nice and thick and heavy. And they're different sizes. There's your leader disc, the biggest, and then there's sort of like most giant factions have a bunch of guys that are sort of like their basic weedier giants, and then they have sort of their middle-tier giants. And then they also have, depending on the giant faction, there might be an additional good-sized disc for a particularly famous champion or maybe something else that goes with them. So all the factions are very asymmetric, and you can tell that a lot of work was put into trying to make the factions feel like the faction from Dungeons & Dragons. So fire giants need to feel like fire giants. You can tell the game designers fire giants are going to feel like fire giants. They're not going to be just a little harder to kill versions of hill giants. There's going to be something fiery about them. So you get all that, plenty of those dudes. You also get the 12 figures. So each faction, in addition to the discs, each faction gets 2 giants that are the right scale. So they're very, very big giants, but they're scales to each other. So if you know your Dungeons & Dragons giants, you know that hill giants are smaller than, for example, storm giants, and that works out. So they all look right. There are 2 poses per faction, but they all look exactly like they should. They're bald where they need to be. They have flaming swords. The fire giants have flaming swords. All that stuff's happening. Yeah. They're board game.
They're like 2-3 inches tall.
Yeah, they're good. They're giants. Now they wouldn't. they're not big enough to be the giants you'd use in a Dungeons and Dragons game if you had 28 millimeter figures. They're too small for that, but they're nice and large. And what also is nice is the game also comes with 3 of these small folk giant slayer miniatures, which are sort of neutral dudes that get controlled by all the different players as you play through the game, and they attack giants. But what's neat is those being on the board along with the giants give you that nice sense of scale. They remind you that your giants are in fact giant, and it really makes the game work. Mm-hmm. And we noticed when people were walking by looking, everybody kind of walked and stopped and checked our game out. So it definitely, those presence of the giant miniatures or the flaming swords and everything, plus a few little dudes, makes the game feel a little more than just a typical board game. Craig, what'd you think of their board game miniature quality, or maybe like D&D, random box collectible miniature quality, so they're not like, miniature war game quality. But what'd you think of the miniatures?
No, they were nice. I mean, they had some good detail to them. I think for me it was an odd some of them are discs and some of them are models. Kind of that whole sort of structure is throws me off mentally, I guess, a little bit. But the models that they do have are cool. I thought they were neat. I thought the fire giants, the ones that I had, they were cool. They're neat. They flaming swords and fire come out of the guy's hands, and everybody looked different, and they all looked very iconic, according to the artwork and stuff. So I liked them.
And Geoff, you have the higher end paint edition there next to you. I think Andrew let you borrow it. What did you think of the paint qualities?
It's okay. I think that it's comparable to what you get in mechs and minis and stuff like that. It looks like there's about 4 or 5 different colors on each guy. I mean, I'm looking at that, and I haven't seen the regular minis, so I don't know. I'm looking at the fire giant guy, and he's got this flame sword is a translucent orange plastic also. So I don't know if that's special to these as well. But I mean, even his eyebrows are painted here. I'm looking at it, so they certainly touched it up. But some of them could use a wash or some other things. They're certainly not like top notch paint quality, but they certainly look pretty sharp on the table.
Well, nice. Well, good. So about right, and I think that's about typical for board game bits. But I do like how it looks, and I agree with you, Craig. It's a little weird having the models are your champions. Right. Not your leader. Your leader's a disc also, but the models are your champions, and they do have special rules. They're a little harder to kill. They absorb combat better, but it is a little weird having the discs and the guys. But they do. I think I'm glad they have some models in there because it does remind you you're playing giants in a neat way. Also, lots of cards in the game. You also get 12 custom D6s. There are actually 6 sort of generic custom D6s that anybody can use. And then also each faction has a color-coded special die that is optimized for their faction as well. So you each get one of those. So you're going to have your own faction die, and then you're going to add some generic D6s into that when you make your attack rolls and things. More about that in a second. And then, of course, you get the full-color rulebook. It's got a decent reference in the back. There's no table of contents or index, which I hate. But there is a decent sort of on the back of the page, instead of putting the obligatory ad, they've actually put some nice quick reference about turn sequence and things there to look up, which is nice. Also, I do like there's quite a bit of fluff in the book. So, for example, in the very beginning, the second page, I should have shared this with you, Craig, it mentions each of the factions and why they're doing what they're doing. So it explains why fire giants are trying to build a giant forge and take out dragons, while the hill giants are really just trying to gather all the small folk and eat them. They have sort of different agenda, but they explain it in sort of a little story mode, which is kind of neat. And there's even some parts in the game where there's a little call out explaining some extra fluff, and it's like, this has no impact in the game whatsoever, but you might want to know. It just explains it. So it's kind of neat if you're a D&D fan and you kind of want to know a little more. And it kind of was neat for me because as the dungeon master for the campaign, we actually just started running into some giants, and for me it gave me a little more backstory and a little more thought around the different factions of giants. So I really got into that part of it as well. So I definitely think there's a little extra mileage in this game for you if you're a D&D fan and are particularly interested in the Society of Giants, if you will. I don't know how many people are like me like that, but there's a few, I'm sure. So anyway, that's what's in the box. What do you guys think for value? So Craig, for $80 for what's in the box, Geoff for $130 for the pre-painted version. Do you think that's a fair price? Too much? Too little? Where are we on value?
I'll cede to Geoff first on this one.
Well played.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gallant.
Well,
I think
indeed,
that
Professor.
I think that the base game, I think for 80 is about what I would expect for that type of a game. I think it may be it's a little bit on the high side. It seems to me. I think maybe like a $70 game for this, but I think it's right there. I don't know if I would want to pay $130 for the deluxe version. Just looking at the minis here, I don't think it's enough of an upgrade, perhaps, to justify that. But I guess it depends on. It just seems for $50, I could put some paint on these guys and make them look pretty reasonable if that was really what I was into to get it onto the table.
Yeah. I feel if they could have been a little bit bigger, so they could have, but I think they'd be a lot bigger to be right scale for D&D. But if they could also be used for D&D, that'd be pretty nice. But they're a little small.
Oh, they'd have to be huge, though.
Well, yeah, that wouldn't really work, but it'd be cool.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that for some reason the 80 is about right, but you're right, plus or minus a little bit there. But I think the 130 feels high for me because the pre-paints, I've seen them in photos and they don't they're not bad. They don't really jump out as me as like, ooh, it's worth.
No, but that's $50, right?
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
For 15 models.
Right.
That seems very high.
It does.
$15 just for the paint jobs. And are they professional paint jobs or are they standard WizKids pre-paints?
I think that's the latter.
Because that would actually be kind of criminal.
I don't know, but it's a little. I think that part's a little tough, and especially as a miniature gamer who can paint mine pretty easily.
Right?
So
I would say 80 puts it probably where it should be from a marketing standpoint because I'm like, I mean, it's not going to get people who are on the fence to buy it. I think it's a little high to do that, but it's going to be. If you're intrigued, you're going to buy it. It's the point. The price is not going to stop a person who's already interested. I don't think. Mm-hmm. But like, if I was going, I don't know, Giants, maybe 80 for considering it's mostly cardboard, that probably would have stopped me. Although there's a lot of cardboard we didn't even see, considering how many giant factions there are that we didn't see, and how many other things that were going on. So I'm sure there's even more stuff than we saw.
Yeah, I think
so. Because I blame your transportation.
Okay,
it's so
efficient.
It's so efficient that I didn't even see half the stuff that you had. Exactly.
Right. So so you could double the tokens and the bits, right? Because there's also some nice little cards, little oversized cards for each of your leader. Sort of goes in front of you. Your champion stats go in front of you for each of your giants as well. So, and the artwork on there is really nice. So there's some nice artwork on the cards too. So there's a lot going on there. Again, I think 80 is probably fair. I wouldn't say it's a bargain, but it's a fair price. All right, let's talk about how we played this game and set it up. So first of all, to get this thing set up, you flop out the board. Now, if you haven't pre-sorted everything, there's a lot of bits that can get all messed up, and I had not fully taken advantage of my new transport as well as I should have on the way in, so I had to sort some things out. But you flop the board out. First thing that's interesting is all 6 factions of giants are always somehow involved in the game, but in true D&D fashion, if you have less than 6 players, if you have 6 players, then everybody's playing a faction of giants. Everything's easy. You set up and go.
Right.
If you're playing with less than 6 players, then some number of giant factions will be NPCs. And they literally call them NPCs in the game because, of course, Dungeons & Dragons, non-playing characters for you non-role players out there. So some number of factions will be NPCs. And what's interesting is, by the rules of the game, although I've seen people experiment with this, it specifically says, for a 3-player game, these specific factions are NPCs. In a 4-player game, these 2 factions, which may not be the same ones that were in the 3-player one, are NPCs. And in a 5-player game, this one faction is an NPC. So it's I think it's because there's a lot of heavy asymmetric play in this game. And I think they figured out that, having one particular faction as a player faction when there's a certain player count may make the game bounce a little off. So it's kind of interesting you're forced into that. So which is really interesting about the game, because that means that when you have different player counts, the gameplay experience changes because different asymmetric factions are involved, which is sort of neat.
Yeah, I think that it's really one of the real positive things that I think that they did with this is that 6 players is hard to get on a regular basis, right? And I've seen a lot of games where like there's one faction that you only use when you get to 6 players. They have this same 2 factions for 2 players. They add one more for 3 players, one more for 4 players, and so on. And it absolutely is not this here. I mean, with 3, 4, and 5 players, it's different factions that sit out for every single game.
Right.
So if you go from 3 players to 4 players, when you go from 3 to 4 factions, 3 out of the 4 factions that you see in the 4-player game are different than you saw in the 3-player game. There's only one that carries over from one to the other.
In fact,
so
that's exactly right.
I think that's a really nice job that helps you experience all of the factions without having to get to 6 players.
Right, and it's awesome, and I like that too. But it does create one interesting nuance that you don't normally see in board games, which was Craig and myself and Tim were sitting down to play the game at 3 players. We'd already sorted out all of our factions, were ready to go. The NPCs were figured out. We put them in the box, and another player came up and said, "Hey, can I play?" And normally in a game, you just give them an extra faction and you go in. But in this one, actually, 2 of the factions we had set up were now NPCs. They got to tear the whole thing apart. And so, unfortunately, we said no to him because we were too far along.
I was starving. It was me.
So the moral of that story is,
Giants, I guess.
Right. Moral of that story is don't, make sure if you want to play a game with Assault of the Giants, get in at the beginning. Don't wait a moment because you'll be causing trouble. But that's pretty interesting. So then you get to by the rules. There's a token for each faction. You shake them up for the ones that aren't NPCs, and you randomly distribute those. But of course, I've always let people pick their faction. And then you go ahead and give each player their faction components. And so what you get a lot of cool stuff to make you feel like you're running a bunch of giants. You get a leader card and a leader token, that disc for your leader. You're going to get a champion card, and you get the champion figures. So you're also going to get a bunch of the unit discs to represent them. You're going to get a command card deck. So this is going to be your hand of cards that allows you to take your actions each turn. And this deck, you don't have to bother shuffling it because you get access to all those cards all the time, which I like. There's not a random element to what you can do. You always have access to everything. You're also going to be a big deck of, you're going to get your own special event cards. There's an event deck also that people share for the events they can try to achieve, but also each faction has their own faction-specific events that really add the flavor of what your faction is trying to do. So essentially, there are missions that you are trying to do for your factions, and they're completely different. Mine is to go out and try to occupy as much of the small folks, the Hill Giants, small folk land as possible, and then start consuming people as food. Meanwhile, the Fire Giants are off trying to build a bunch of forges by getting forge tokens on the table. Meanwhile, the Frost Giants are trying to raid the small folk. All kinds of crazy stuff happening, completely different. But the mechanics of the game, they're the same. You read your event card and do what it says. You try to achieve what it says to do. So from a FOF point of view, a lot going on, but from a game mechanic point of view, you read the card and do what it says.
Right. And also from a game mechanic point of view, this is really, it's a conflict dudes on a map game. You think Kemet, you think Nexus Ops and stuff like that. But none of the events require attacking another player, right? They're all about, being places on the map or getting things onto the board, right, or, doing types of things. They're getting resources. There's nothing directly that says, okay, your job is to go out and just start smacking people upside the head.
Exactly.
Which I think is interesting when you look at, in the context of a conflict game and how that works out, which I'm sure we'll come back to later.
Yeah, because the conflict happens the way conflict often does, which is to execute these events, there's icons on them that require certain rune tokens. And one of the mechanics of the game is all the resource cards always must be face up in front of every player. So I can tell that Craig has a green rune, and I need the green rune to finish my thing. There are things I can do to get that green rune from Craig. So conflict, it becomes that he has something I want. Or Craig is standing on the land I need to get to finish the event, and I cannot enter the space he's in without kicking him out. So conflict is caused not because the card says to do it, but because of the situation of the game, which again is going to change from game to game, which is pretty neat.
Right, and not because you just got angry at somebody necessarily.
Right, exactly.
You could still do that, but a lot of conflict games you just got to pick. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'm going to go after this person,
right,
and that can get personal, and it can create bad feelings. And when people hear conflict games and battle games, a lot of people shy away from that because of those effects. And I think that in this case, you're right. There's conflict, but you can say, look, I need to get to that territory.
Right,
so,
I can justify it.
And there's a rule that you can give somebody passage if you want to. Yep. You don't have to, but that options are there. So it doesn't, it sets up the conditions for conflict, but it doesn't, it does it in a more indirect way.
Exactly right. A good catch. So you get your unit tokens, your command cards, your special event cards, also story cards. So in addition to your special event cards, each faction's got a story card that's sort of like what they're trying to achieve, which includes the series of events they're going to try to execute on. So again, you got that nice little narrative happening for your faction, that story you're trying to make happen for your giants. So you get all that stuff. You're going to throw the leader, the 2 champion units, the plastic models, into your starting home region. So the map is fixed, and your starting regions are always fixed. So the hill giants always start in the same spot. The fire giants always start in the same spot. So that part's always the same. But again, because the different factions are different NPCs, it does change, where you're going to be from game to game. Also, there is a little chart in the book that the NPCs put their guys in those spots too. So even though the NPCs aren't playing, their giants are in certain spots on the map, and you got to go kick them out if you need to get to that spot. So they do consume space and become sort of a neutral problem for the table. You're going to go ahead and ready the Giant Slayer cards as well. So the 3 Giant Slayer, the three small folk, they're on the side of the table with their cards, and there'll be things that happen during the game that allow players to bring them into the game and attack other giants with them. And then you're going to shuffle the 3 major decks. There's an event deck, which are basically the bonus missions you can try to accomplish. There is a resource deck, which is all the cool stuff you're going to collect to be able to execute on events and give you other cool things. And then there's a spell deck, so you're going to be able to acquire magic as well, because Dungeons & Dragons, magic, right? And the last thing you're going to do, and it's the most complicated thing, and one of the few rules in the game that I found confusing and caused us to mess up our first game, which is they have a bunch of victory point tokens called ording points, right? Because as Craig mentioned earlier, the giants are all about their ordning. Yes, ordning. Thank you. So you're supposed to take all these square tokens and put them into little piles that add up to 10, and put a set of them equal to a certain amount of points based on player count into pool 1, and another set of them equal to a smaller number into pool 2. And the book says face up, which confused us because the picture of the game setup has them face down, so that's a little confusing. But they should be face up. And essentially what's going to happen is things that will happen during the game that you'll get ording points, right? So you'll complete an event, or you'll kill an opponent, or other things that'll happen, and it says earn this much ording points. And what you're supposed to do is just take them out of the piles and take them into your possession. And the piles are divided up into little piles of 10, so you can quickly and easily look at the piles remaining and understand how many points are left in the game, because what causes the game to end is getting through those piles of ording points. So when you get through the first pool of ordning points, what then happens is you go into the end game, they call it, and by the rules of the game, you're not allowed to invade another giant's home region until the first pool of ordning points is gone. And then when the second pool of ordning points is gone, you play until everybody's had an equal number of turns in the game, and the game ends, and the player with the most ordning points wins. So essentially, you're trying to burn through all the points. I believe Small World works the same way, right? You're trying to burn through all the points, but the thing is there's 2 stages of it, and that's why these got them divided into little piles. So when I first read the rulebook, I was a little confused about that, but once I played the game, I said, that's what you're supposed to do. So that's that. So essentially, it's a victory point.
It's also a little confusing because it says to put them in piles of 10 points. Yes. But the second pile is only supposed to be 15 points if you have 3 players, which is hard to make up at a piles of 10. So
a nice example there would have been good, I think. But in any case, I've played the game now enough times to know that all you need to do is put them into piles of roughly 10 so that you can easily look at the ordning pools and know how many points are left so that you know how close the game is getting to the end. I think that's the whole objective of putting them in little piles of 10.
Right.
So that is setup, which is actually the most complicated part of the game because playing the game is super simple. And I like games. I love this mechanic, Geoff, and here's where I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So really, before you start playing the game, you should really explain the objective. And so the objective of this game, as I mentioned earlier, is get all the ordning points. So basically, it's a victory point game. It's a dudes on the map game, but you're really doing things to get victory points, right? So you want to end the game with most of those. The thing you'll want to know is, how do I get ordning points? Well, look for any card that says get OP on it, right? And that is mostly events. That's where the big OP is available. But also things on your story card will give it to you. Things on your own faction special event card will give it to you. Some of the command cards you play will give you ordning points. And every time you kill enemy giants in combat, you defeat stuff in combat, you will get some ordning points as well. So pretty much most of the things you can do in the game will generate some amount of ordning points.
Right. There's also shared missions, which I don't know if we talked about. So each faction has their own specific missions that only they can do, but then there's other missions which is like hold this territory and you get a certain number of points.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that in setup. There were 2 things in setup I kind of skimmed over. One is when you shuffle the event deck, which are the shared missions that Jeff's messaging, you turn 3 of them face up. And these events, A, anybody can solve them, and on them there's a prerequisite, and they almost always require you to be in a certain territory on the map. And nicely, the game comes with 3 tokens that say event on them that you put on the territories that are the 3 face-up events. So all the players can easily see which territories are destinations for events. And these are never a giant's home territory. They're always one of the small folk territories. And so what you're going to try to do is get to that spot. And these cards almost always have a rune icon on them, which means you're going to have a rune card, which is from the resource deck. And you're going to have that rune card. You have to meet the other prerequisites, and then you can achieve the event to get the OP, right? The other little setup trick is you're going to also flip over a number of resource cards equal to the number of players, and then in giant order. So each giant token has an initiative number on it. So there's always the hill giants always go first, and they always go in an order according to the tokens. So you're going to go ahead and go first. The person's going to get to pick one of those resource cards as a starting resource. You go around the table in giant order and it gets that, and then you flip another set of those cards over in the number of players again. You go in reverse player order and do it again. So everybody's going to get essentially 2 starting resource cards as well, right? So the whole table sees the shared events that are face up and where they are on the map, and the whole table's got some starting resources. So that was the part of the setup I missed. Making sense so far? Mostly?
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So gameplay, we're trying to get victory points. So there are really 2 steps to the whole turn. And so the first, and you're going to go in giant initiative order, right? So if you're playing the hill giants like I was, you will go first. And the first thing I can do is claim an event card. So super easy, as Geoff mentioned, there's those 3 shared event cards out there, plus there's your own event cards that are in front of you. You look at that, any of those cards, can you take one of those? Do you have the prerequisites for it, which usually involves having a rune and being in the right spot? If the answer to that is yes, turn in your rune card, put it in the discard pile, put the event card in the discard pile, get the ordning points, and draw in a new event card and put it face up so there's a new place people can go to get an event, right? Super simple. On your first turn, you won't have one of those probably, but they're out there. Secondly, you're going to play 1 command card. Now, this is the part of the game I think is really cool mechanic. So in your hand of command cards, you have all these different actions you can do. And they're the typical actions you might see in a Dudes on the Map game. So one of your cards says move, one of your cards says attack, one of your cards says plunder, trade. Most of those cards are the same for everybody, but every faction's got 1 special card that is only available to their faction. And what you're going to do is you're going to play this card face up in front of you, and the card is going to give you a primary action, and then at the bottom of the card, there's going to be an arrow pointing either to the left or to the right, and then have some bonus condition, and that bonus condition is going to be based on the number of command cards that have already been played to the left or to the right of that card. And when you play command cards, so what's going to happen is I'm going to play a command card, do its action, then it's Craig's turn. Craig's going to play a command card from his hand and do its action. Now, in front of Craig, he's going to put down his command cards in front of him. I'm going to put my command cards down in front of myself. Geoff would put his command card down, and we keep going around the table. Now, here's the thing. You don't pick your command card up until you play a command card that says, get all your command cards back. So, after I play my first command card, the next command card I play, I don't have access to the first one anymore. So if I moved in my first as my first action, next time I come around, the play comes to me again, I don't have move in my hand anymore. But I can play a different card, right? And the arrows on the bottom of it might point to the left where I already have played my move card, and now that's going to be a bonus. Is that making sense, Geoff? You following it? So it's got a neat mechanic where you're going to build a tableau in front of yourself, and the cards, playing the cards in a certain sequence, so optimizing the activities you take will give you optimal performance if you're trying to do certain things, but that requires you to think ahead. So you're not locked in. It's not like programmed movement per se, but it's got this thing where I need to optimally, what I really want to do is play my leader card first, because every card to the right of it means that anytime I fight after my leader card's played, I'm going to have all these bonuses for every card to the right. So I really want to do my leader card thing first, but if there's an opportunity to grab a certain piece of land before Geoff gets it, really what I want to play is the move card first. So do I want to build the optimal situation, or do I need to react to what my opponent's doing and kind of not have that optimal situation? Kind of reminds me of Rune Wars, the board game, where there was those activity cards where if you played them in the right order, they got you bonus powers, but if you played them in the wrong sequence, you didn't get the bonus power. Kind of like that, but in a little more subtle methodology. What do you think of this mechanic, Geoff?
I'm a big fan of this, and Andy is a big fan of this also. And actually, he's been trying to use this mechanic in like 3 games so far that I was not involved in the playtesting of this one, but there was 2 earlier games that he was working on, neither of which ended up being published, but both of them used this same idea, except he's really taken it to the next level with this game. So in the first time that I played it, you had cards and you put them down in a sequence, and then you picked them back up when you were done. When you wanted to reuse some of the cards, you had to like take a pass turn and pick them up. So you wanted to be able to play as many cards as you could to be as efficient, but it didn't have that whole bonus system.
Yeah.
And he streamlined a little bit in the second one, but for this one is when he added that bonus system. There's 2 major innovations that he added to it. One is the bonus system, which just amplifies this idea of you want to be not just as efficient as possible to get as many of your cards out on the table as you can before you have to take time to pick them all back up, but also, to think about the order so that you can get the bonuses that you want to get and balance that, like you said, against, so it's time versus power.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really nifty. And the other thing, which I'm sure you're about to get to in a second, but when you pass, in all of the other incarnations of this that I saw from Andy, when you passed, you just skipped your turn. You just pulled your cards back into your hand, and you didn't really get to do anything. But with this one, and he told me that they added it just because people were, people wanted to pick up their cards, but sometimes people just didn't make them feel good to have to sit there and basically miss a turn.
Yep.
So they added this mechanic that when you pick your cards up, you talked earlier about these giant killers, the kind of like a neutral characters that run around the board doing bad things to the other players. You get to control them. Yes. And the more cards that you've played, the more that they can do. So basically, I guess you get like 1 action for each card that you've played when you're picking your cards up, and you get to do that with those little giant killers, and they can run around and try to kill tokens or champions or what have you. And that really, I think, adds a whole other dimension to it, of another advantage of having as many cards as you can on the table.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it's brilliant because it makes that a really fun event. And you're right, the longer you go before you pick up your cards. So theoretically, like, all right, I could move, and then my next turn I could pick up my cards, and the next turn I can move again, and then I can pick up my cards. So I'm essentially moving every other turn. But if I put more down, then if I play, it's called the rest card, by the way, when you pick your stuff up. When I rest, I can heal one of my wounded giants, and then I also can activate, as Geoff mentioned, these giant killers, and it's for one activation for every card to the left. So if I've gone ahead really long time before I pick up, I can do a lot of damage with those giant killers, which is a really neat mechanic. I really like that a lot. And I think this whole arrow, I have not seen this done before, and I thought it was really very clever, because it's kind of got this sort of, I don't know, it feels like one of those programming games, kind of like Robo Rally or I'm totally drawing a blank on the Stagecoach game, Craig, the train game with cowboys.
The Dragon and Flagon, is that what you're trying to say?
Dragon and
Flagon, right?
I was thinking Dragon and Flagon and the other game that we won't mention. But yes, Dragon and Flagon.
Colt Express.
Colt Express, yes. All those games do it. But it's got a different sort of flavor of that, right? Where you're planning up, but you're not locking yourself in, which is sort of interesting. So let's go through the different types, and it'll make it clear.
Yes, and plus, just real jump in a second is the other thing. Well, I guess you'll talk about this, but it also easily enables the designer to differentiate the faction somewhat too, because like, the move card may give some of the giants more moves than other giants.
Exactly.
But when you're teaching it, you just, it's real easy. It's just right there on a card. Boom, that's what you do. And each faction also has a special event card that only they can play.
Yeah, exactly right, Geoff. And that's a great point. They do. There's subtle differences on these cards. So you all have a move card, but the number of movement points you get when you play the move card is different per faction. So exactly right. Nothing to teach. It's all built into the mechanics. So one of the cards is move. Move is super simple. Depending on your giant faction, you're going to get a fixed number of movement points, but then also, for every card to the left of the movement card you just played, you get an additional movement point. So if I do move later in my turn, I've already played 3 cards, and I'm a hill giant, I get 6 plus 3, so I get 9 movement points. And it's very simple. For each movement point I have, I can move one of my giant discs or models 1 space. So I can move the same guy 6 times, or I can move 6 giants once, however I want to do that. One thing to know about movement, I can't end in an enemy region. I can move through an enemy region, and I have 2 choices about moving through an enemy region. I can bribe the enemy by giving them a resource card. So I can be like, Geoff, I'm passing through your region. Here's a card that says food on it. Or I can take a wound as I go through there. And wounding is super simple in this game. Champions can't be wounded. The big plastic dudes, they're unwoundable, which is really nice. The discs, though, you flip them over to the wounded side, so that's simple. So if you're walking through enemy territory with 5 giants, if you got a champion, he can take the hit and not worry about it. But if you don't, someone's going to get flipped over, or you got to bribe your way through. So movement's super simple. You don't have to worry about moving into an enemy space. If you want to fight them, you just stand next to them and play an attack card later. There's no real like ending an enemy space and then doing combat. Nothing like that happens. Another card in your hand is Plunder. So Plunder is basically the top of the card is you get to draw 2 resource cards and keep them. But then on the bottom of the card, for each card to the left, so each card you've played prior to this card, you can plunder an additional resource for 1 for every card as long as you've got an extra giant in a small folk region. So the way you maximize this card is you play it later in your turn, and you have to spread out to many regions so that you can plunder variety. You can't just plunder one region for all it's worth. You got to kind of spread your giants out. So there are several mechanics in the game that really get you to want to own a lot of territory. And this also creates that conflict and tension because it's a reasonably small map. So it doesn't take too long before you're starting to run into the whole thing. I really want to be able to control 4 territories so I can optimize my plunder. But if all 6 people are playing, there's not a lot. It's not hard to get 4 territories for yourself. So that's a tough little balancer there, which I really like as well. And plundering is really important because almost all the event cards for completion require a rune card, and the rune cards are in the resource deck. So you have to go there. Now, one thing I forgot to mention to you, Craig, this is one rule that we missed, is when you do another card you can play is trade. So trade is really interesting, and this is really an evil card. I love the way this
this
card works.
was brutal last night.
So trade is kind of like plunder. You get 1 trade for playing the card, and then +1 for each card to the left. So you're noticing most of the cards simply count to the left, but there are cards that look to the right. More about those in a second. But the trade is to the left. So if I see that I need a green rune, and I see that Geoff has a green rune, when I trade, I have 2 choices. I can either trade with the resource deck, or I can trade with an opponent if my giants and his giants are adjacent somewhere on the table. So if Geoff and I are adjacent, I can say, I see Geoff has got 4 resource cards, and resource cards always face up. Geoff's got 4 resource cards. He's got 2 hammers, he's got a horn, and he's got the green rune I need. Now, the way trading works is I can give Geoff, if I have a trade value of 3, 1 for the card plus 2 cards to the left, I can give Geoff 3 resource cards of my choice, and Geoff must give me back 3 of his resource cards of his choice. Now, if he only has 3 resource cards and I give him 3, he's got to give me all of his 3. So I can basically force him to give me that green rune card if I trade enough stuff to him. But to do that, I have to have enough junk resources to give to him, A, and B, I have enough trade points to be able to trade 3 in one go. Making sense? So I have to set myself up for that move. But what I missed was, if you decide to choose to trade with the resource deck, one of those trades can be searched through the deck and pick a card.
Right.
So that's really powerful because that's how you don't get rune locked out, right? You can go through the deck and find that red rune you need. So that's really nice. And we weren't doing that, and that was slowing things down a little bit. So you get so one of the trades can be that. Plus, if I have 3, there's 2 more that just come out of the deck at random, right? So that's pretty cool. I like that mechanic a lot, and it really creates that tension because if you're adjacent to me now and you've got a cool rune, unless you've got a lot of other junk in your bag to offer me instead of that rune. So you really want to plunder a lot, so you have a lot of just garbage you can give away. Now, nothing's really garbage. All the stuff you find have different values. So weapons you find increase your combat. There's these trumpets you find that augment the magic spells. And then there's food, which really the hill giants want the food, so they'll trade anything for food because that's one of their objectives. And then, of course, there's all the runes, which everybody wants because that completes the events. So trading and plundering making sense. That's really how you get the resources moving around the board.
Yeah, that would have helped.
That would have helped, right?
That little bit about searching the deck would have helped.
Yes,
yeah,
that would have helped. Now, there's then the recruiting card, which is the classic muster, if you will, right? It's getting more dudes on the map. So recruit, you get 2 points plus 1 for every card to the left. You sense a theme here. So the later I play recruit, so I want to play all these cards late, right? Yeah. I need to move late. Right. I need to plunder late. I need to trade late. I need to recruit late. Well, they can't all be late. So some of these cards aren't going to be optimized. So I have to decide what's going to be optimal this turn for me, right? Which I think is pretty neat. Recruit is basically, what's great is each of your discs has a recruit value on it. There's really 3 stats on a disc. There's some cool artwork, and then there's a number that represents how many attack dice the giant throws. There's a number that represents sort of the giant's defense, and then there's a number that represents the giant's recruiting cost. And the recruiting cost is how many recruit points it takes to get them on the table. It's also how many ording points they're worth if they're slain. So the harder they are recruit, the more they are when they fall, but generally the more powerful they are as well. And this is another place where the factions are asymmetric. The hill giants have more discs, so they can have more giants on the board. They're also dirt cheap. They're also really easy to kill. Meanwhile, the more powerful giants like Fire and Storm, a lot less discs, but super hard to kill and pretty expensive to recruit, right? Makes sense there. And again, recruiting's super simple. You count your recruit points based on the card plus the number of cards to the left, and you can put that many dudes on your starting territory. One note, as I mentioned before, all the giants have fixed starting territory, but the cloud giants have a special token representing their floating cloud castle. They can move that around the board, and they can actually recruit wherever the cloud castle is, which gives them a mobility that no one else can match, which is pretty neat. So there's a little faction-specific coolness there, too. Oh, and I forgot to mention, also lots of cool detail to fluff. So D&D fans will know that storm giants are lawful good and friends of the small folk. Storm giants will never plunder the small folks' regions, and in fact, they don't. The storm giants plunder card actually reads negotiate. They actually don't. So little things like that are throughout the game that I really like the appreciation for the source material. They've done a really good job with that. So that's recruit. Then you've got the leader command card. This card is specific to each leader, each faction. Each faction's leader card has a special rule on it. And this is one of the first cards that we've mentioned that actually is affected by cards to the right. And how these work is most of the leader cards give you a die reroll in combat for every card to the right, as long as that card's face up. So the mechanic here is you get your leader card down early, and then if you fight later in your, couple rounds later, you're going to get a reroll for every card to the right of that leader card. So it's kind of like your leader beating the war drum and getting your guys revved up. And then the leader powers generally also are, they make you guys fight better later as well. So it's kind of a thing. You can do that early, but if you're doing that early, you're delaying something else that might be important as well. So the leader card's pretty neat. That makes sense to everybody?
Yep.
Cool. Almost done with the cards here. Then there's the magic command card, which allows you to draw 2 spell cards. The magic card also is empowered to the right. So getting one of your magic cards out early will actually let you, there's an icon on the dice that is a swirl. And we'll talk about combat in a minute, but the swirl icon has no effect unless you have some cards up that lets you do something with it. So by getting the magic card down early, it lets you turn swirls into shields. Basically makes your guys harder to kill. For every card to the right, you can turn 1 swirl into a shield. So again, you want to get that card out early. So the leader card's going to give you rerolls in combat. The magic card's going to give you defense in combat. And so you really want to cut these cards out early if you're going to do a lot of combat this turn. Right? The last card is attack, which, again, attack is going to let you do a fight, but also it's going to let you turn swirls into clubs per card to the left. So playing attack late is more powerful because more of your swirls turn into damage than would be if you play attack early. So there's really some interesting combos here, and Craig mentioned when we were playing, it's kind of like you got to play the game once or twice to really sort of understand all your options. So it's not complicated to learn, but it will take a playthrough, I think at least one, to really start to understanding what you could really do if you really want to min-max your opportunities.
Yeah, and then there's a next level that you can go to of really paying attention to what your opponents haven't played yet and what options they have, which has a whole other layer of the tactics that you may choose to do.
So there's a lot of cool replayability here, a lot of tactical depth for you as you learn the game. And this is one of the things I think is really interesting. I think a lot of people, you see a game like this and you're like, oh, it's cashing in on the Dungeons & Dragons brand, but the mechanics here are really pretty slick, and it's really what drew me into the game. Then there's the rest command we pretty much already talked about. That's going to let you heal 1 giant, flip it back over, and it's going to let you pick up all your cards. But before you do that, you're going to activate those giant hunters. And there's a nice little reference on the board itself that says how many action points it takes to do things with the giant slayer. So basically, it's 2 of them to bring them on the board, and then 1 to move them and 1 to fight them. And so what you're going to want to do is you play that card late enough, you're going to get like 3, 4, 5, 6 actions, which is enough to bring all the giant hunters onto the board, and then going to let them go ahead and maybe attack. And if they're in the same space, you want that because they all play off each other and they do a lot of cool damage. And they're named Hook, Line, and Sinker, which is just kind of fun. So they're really nasty, and they will kill giants. They will kill giants dead. And what's cool about them too is if they kill a giant, the player controlling them gets half the ording value for whatever giants they kill. And if the defending giant manages to kill them, because combat does damage in both directions when you do it, if the defending giant manages to kill them, they get resource cards for every giant hunter they kill. So there's a little benefit for surviving a giant hunter attack, but they're dangerous enough where giants will fall when they get to where you want them, and that's really annoying. Now that's pretty much all the cards. What we didn't cover is all the faction-specific cards. Each faction's got one additional card in their hand that's specific to them that generally advances their story. Right, so if it's the Hill Giants, it's called Stuff, where they can basically trade food in for ordering points because the main goal of the leader of the Hill Giants is to get as fat as humanly possible. So she's just trying to eat food.
Fat as giantly possible.
Gigantically
good catch,
possible.
gigantically possible. Right. Meanwhile, I think Craig's guys are trying to build forges, which puts forge tokens on there, which eventually builds this giant war machine or something, which allows them to kill a dragon.
Like an artificial giant.
Yes, a giant robot.
Robot giant.
Yes. And there's actually a token for that, right? You get that done, the token comes on the table, and it's
yet another
awesome.
token.
Yeah, it's awesome. So all these kind of things, we need to get into the details of that, but there's all these cool little asymmetric moves that each of the factions has to do as well, which is pretty neat. So that's basically all the core mechanics. The only thing left is combat, which is pretty simple. But any questions about that or anything you want to add, guys, before we get into combat? It's really pretty simple, though.
I really love the giant slayers because even if you're doing poorly, the giant slayers give you something fun to do.
They're a lot of fun, and they remind you of the scale, right? Because those little tiny models remind you that there's giants running about.
Yes.
Yep.
Exactly. I liked the I like, and I think when you think about it, I mean, there's the wanting more plastic, which I do, wouldn't really make sense because they would all still be roughly the same size as the giants you're already having.
Right.
So that you'd never be able to fit all that on the board. I just realized that. But anyway, yeah. So I like the rest. I like the mechanic, like you said, of placing all the cards. But in particular, I like the fact that the rest lets you basically unlock those little giant slayers for a quick slap to somebody else.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, from a design standpoint, we try to what I call avoiding a feel bad. So you don't want to have something where the players have to do something that they're not happy about doing. So you always want to have some sort of positive potential outcome for doing something.
Yeah, I think the giant hunters definitely have that feeling. One thing also, Craig mentioned the discs and the plastic. One thing that's nice about the discs is all the stats you need to know for combat are on the discs. So the only time you got to look to your main cards is if one of the champions is involved, because the champions don't have any stats because they're a plastic figure, but there's a card for those guys in your main in front of each player. So it reduces the need to go back and ask someone, what's that guy's offense or defense? Because most of the time you just look at the territory, count up all the numbers on the discs, and you know what you're facing, which is kind of a nice, simple, keeps the game moving mechanic.
Yeah.
So combat's really super simple. You declare where you're attacking. You played your attack card deck. I'm going to go attack there. You might have some spell cards spell cards are super simple. They have a text on them that tells you when you use them, and there are some that are start a battle, so this might be the time you do that. What's kind of neat about spell cards is they have a primary ability and they have a boosted ability, and the boosted ability requires you discard it looks like a horn resource. So you might be able to boost your spell there. But basically, combat, as you declare where you're going to fight, you're going to figure out your dice pool. Both sides gets a dice pool. So the attacker gets a dice pool, and that's just you add up all the attack value numbers on your discs, and your champion has a value on his card. So you add them all up, and you're going to roll that many dice. There is a maximum pool size of 7 dice, which is your faction-specific die plus the 6 gray ones. You're going to roll those, and then now this is sort of a fiddly bit, but it works, which is I'm going to roll all mine, and I'm going to add up the total number of clubs I roll. So some of the dice have 1 club on the side, 2 clubs on the side, 3 clubs on the side. So I'm going to add up all my clubs, and I'm going to add up all my shields. And there's this little track on the board, and they give you some extra tokens. There's a token for a red shield and a red club for the attacker, and a blue shield and a blue club for the defender. And I'm going to mark on this track that, let's say I rolled 7 clubs and 2 shields for the attacker. Right, so I mark those. And the reason I need to mark them is only because there's not enough dice for both players to roll at the same time. So this is clearly done in a budgetary consideration mode. So I roll my dice, I mark on the little track how I did, and then Craig, if he's the defender, he's going to roll his dice pool, which again, add up all the attack value of all his dice involved in the fight, of guys involved in the fight. He rolls those dice, and then there's a blue token for defense and for clubs and shields for the defender. He's going to mark what he got, right? And then we're going to compare. So how it works is each side's going to take an amount of damage equal to the number of clubs they rolled minus the number of shields the other guy rolled, right? So if I rolled 7 clubs and 2 shields, and Craig rolled 6 clubs and 3 shields, my 7 is minus 3, so I actually did 4 damage to Craig's side, right? And then we look at Craig's giant discs, and he has to take damage on one disc at a time. So he takes that 5 points, and each giant has sort of a defense value, and if that 5 is greater than or equal to that giant's defense value, it's killed outright. If it's less than it, the giant is flipped over to the wounded side. It's that simple. One bonus is that champions always must be hit first and cannot be wounded. So if the champion's defense is 6 and I only do 5, he just shrugs the wound off and nothing happens. So if you got a champion involved in a battle, you got to hit hard. A minor hit, he'll just deflect it and it won't even, like he didn't even fight. One thing to remember is if you do kill an enemy giant, you get you get their recruit number in ording points immediately. And the ording points are earned on both sides. So if the defender gets some, he gets it, and the attacker gets some, he gets it. So both sides are going to take wounds and potentially losses. One other thing we did wrong, though, Craig, is that once a giant is wounded, he still has that number of wounds he can take. But if let's say he's got a 5 now, then once he's wounded, and I only do 4 wounds, he's still killed. So if you're wounded and you take hits again, you die. Doesn't matter how many. Which is interesting. So we were not doing that. It was making the giant slayers too hard to kill.
Yeah.
So that's that.
Yeah, it'll make a difference.
Yeah, I don't know if it made that much of a difference, but it is a thing. But that's pretty much combat, so it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I only find it fiddly having to mark on the track because it slows the game down. I wish there was enough dice in the game to not have to do that. That's the only downside to it, I think. What'd you think of combat, Craig?
I thought it was very simple. I like that, I'm again going back to the fact that the stats are all on the tokens. It's quick. You just count it up. You're looking at the red numbers. Those are your dice. You figure. One thing I didn't like was that you have to have that combat tracker. Mm-hmm. I didn't like the fact that I would roll my dice and then I would figure out where to put my little clubs and my shields on that track, and then you would have to roll dice, and then you have to figure it out, and then we have to do the math.
Right.
To me, it seemed like it added a step that prolonged that aspect of the game that really didn't add anything to it, I think.
Yeah, I would just love a few more die in there, but I know it's a cost thing. Jeff, any thoughts on combat? Sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and I think that that's appropriate for the game because I think the emphasis here is not on the battles. I mean, some games like Axis and Allies, you want to have these big climactic battles with lots of stuff going on and swings back and forth, and that's not really what it's about here. It's not. It's about the story. It's about the events. It's about manipulating the cards. So the combat's sort of a secondary thing. So you don't want to have to force the players to spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's pretty much the whole game. That's it. A few notes. I think spells are pretty cool. They do a lot of different things. Some of them augment combat. Some of them allow you to teleport your guys around the board, which can be very powerful. Avoid going through enemies' territory. Surprise moves. Things like that. So they allow you to subvert the turn sequence. Like at the start of your turn, you can play a spell that lets you move into adjacent territory, which is huge because I didn't have to play a move card. So now maybe I can do something I couldn't do before, right? Some notes about event cards is pretty cool. Like some of the event cards, anybody can claim it, but if a particular faction happens to claim it, they get bonus things. So there'll be some generic events that are more beneficial to hill giants or more beneficial to frost giants. So you might want to get that one. I might just want to claim it so that Craig can't get it because maybe I don't want him to get that extra ording point or whatever it does for them. So Craig, any thoughts on some of the faction specific stuff you noticed in the game?
No, I mean, with only 3 factions, I was hungry. I'll claim that I was hungry.
Hungry like a hill giant.
I was, yeah.
I will say this, I could tell very clearly that the hill giants were easy to drop. You could run into my square and kill 3 guys, without too much trouble. Meanwhile, I was lucky to kill 1 fire giant or 1 frost giant. So there's definitely, you feel that. But also, I think, the hill giants are they're almost always in every game. I think there's only one number of players where the hill giants aren't playing. They're an NPC. The hill giants are the game's timer because it is super easy for them to get ording points. Basically, they don't get a lot per turn, but they can get them almost every turn because of their food thing. If you let hill giants get food, they're going to skull ording points pretty darn quick. And so she's just always growing fatter. And so you really have to kind of watch the hill giants, and they keep you honest and not just ignoring your victory conditions. So I don't know, Jeff. Have you any insights as you read through some of the cards and some of the mechanics of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think the factions are really nicely differentiated, and they take great pains to, like I said, add that story element. And it's in a number of places. So you've got it in the rules. There's a couple of pages in the rules explaining each story. Then you've got the actual event cards. These are the events that you're trying to do. And then for each faction, there's also a story card, which gives, again, sort of just a narrative overview of what you're trying to accomplish. Right. That's supposed to, sort of explain what the events are doing. So they really want you to kind of feel that story and feel that forward momentum of moving and moving forward and trying to get more and more points. And some of them are, and some of them are more complicated than others, which helps giving them to different players and, that may want to do different types of games.
Yeah, I think that's great. And one last thing I'll mention is I love the flavor of the giant slayers. So what's cool about them is they each have their own ability, but when they're all in the same square and you spend a point to attack, all three of them attack and they add all their dice together, but each of them has a special rule that when together, they all augment each other and become even more powerful. So one gives you a reroll, one lets you turn the swirl into more damage, and all of a sudden, when all three of them are together, they're really wiping out giants. And so you really benefit from getting them all together too. So I really think the whole game, the theme, the way the mechanics work, it comes together nicely.
They infested hill giant territory for a while.
They did. It was very annoying actually. They were troublemakers. Final scoring, super simple. So basically, you've been getting ording points all the time. One note, when you earn ording points, you can put them face down. So people, Small World-esque, you got to kind of remember what people earned, or you're going to just have to be just guessing. One of the things that happens, though, is when after that first pool of ording points is gone, now you can invade each other's home territories. And when the second pool runs out, you play till everybody's had an equal number of turns and you stop. It is possible to score beyond what's left in the pool. So if someone scores late, they still can get extra tokens to remind them how much they got. But the token pools are just there to tell you when the game's going to end, right? And that's it. And then most ording points wins. Pretty much all there is to it. Any last thoughts before we go into final thoughts? All right.
I'm good.
Let's wrap this thing up. Craig, in the style of a hungry hill giant roaming the lands of small folk, please describe the patent-pending D6G rating system.
Okay.
My tummy hurts. Oh, I wonder if I want to eat that village over there or that village over there. I have to pick one or the other. Because I hill giant and not too bright, I'm going to rate them in a system where the number goes down instead of up, where those stupid cloud giants are. So the lower the number, the better the village is, or the game. And the higher the number, the worse the village is, or the game, because it's closer to those stinking cloud giants.
Well done.
There you go.
That's right.
Yeah, you're really getting your money's worth out of that echo button.
It's a...
I love me my echo button.
It was worth every penny, Jeff. Every penny.
It goes through phases. Today is an on phase.
Right. That's right.
I'm honored that I'm here for that.
Yeah.
So the rating system is such that if it is a low number, that's the percentage roll on a D6. You need to like the game, the average gamer to like
There's
the
no
game.
Percentage involved.
Roughly.
It's not a percentage.
And if we give you a reroll, it is just a half score, which we know that anybody involved in math would tell us is incorrect, but we don't care.
Yes.
So moving on.
Indeed.
All right.
Yes.
So, Craig, you want to start with your final thoughts? We'll let Jeff go last because
Sure.
he's absorbing all the
Yes,
the-
with the caveat that I was hungry.
Right. Like a hill giant.
Okay.
Not like a wolf.
So all publishers,
like a
when
hill
you send
giant.
your review copies to Craig, pack them, put little snack
Exactly.
packs
Put
in
little
the
snack
box.
packs.
Little nibbles.
Could never hurt. Could never hurt.
Little Biscoff.
Okay.
Little Biscoff cookie.
I'm being a good little boy. I'm not snacking over much, but when my little snacks run out and it's time for my meal, I need my meal.
Seems fair.
Yeah. So let's see. I enjoyed the game. I can appreciate the game for what it is, while at the same time it really I don't think I don't think I would go out and buy it. I would play it again if Russ wanted to play it. And the reasons, visually, I wanted more plastic, and I know, A, why there wasn't as much plastic, and B, that the cardboard was actually a better move, and C, why there was some plastic and not all cardboard or all plastic. But at the same time, aesthetically, I didn't really like that mix. Right. But, what's that?
You wanted more giants because giants.
Right? I wanted more giants because giants.
Right.
But, having said that, the graphic design of the tokens that they have was great. The artwork's awesome. It's very evocative. I loved the map. The models, like I said, the models that they did have, I loved. I wish that the combat was simpler than tracking and doing math and things like that. And I think maybe my problem is that I'm not smart enough to play this game, I guess. It's too smart for me. It's not you, Assault of the Giants. It's me. I'm not smart enough. No, but because there's so many different ways to win, and there's so many different ways. I mean, so many different ways you can approach this. Do you want to get all your cards out so you're maximizing your cards, or are there a few cards that you want to be doing over and over again so you're going to churn your turn faster than that? And I think there's a steep learning curve here for the variety of different things you can do. The variety of different things you want to do, and for every race of giants, it's going to be different. So it's a very complex. Yeah, that's what I mean when I say that I can appreciate the game. I think it's a very well-designed game. I think it's very tight. I think it's very interesting. I think it's very evocative of the theme. At the same time, I found learning it to be sort of difficult. I found that I felt like although it is not a Euro, it has aspects of Euro-ness to it in which, like, I want to do stuff that I'm not going to be able to do. I can't do everything I want to do. So there's a frustration factor that's built into it, to the point where I think I would probably really enjoy the game if I knew it well, but I did not enjoy my first playthrough enough for that to serve as an impetus for me to spend the time to learn to play it well, if that makes sense.
Okay. So what would you rate this game
I would say I would rate this at a 4+.
Okay.
I still think a lot of gamers are going to like it. I think that I'm not big into the Greyhawk world. I don't know a lot about it, so I again, it was a question of appreciating versus enjoying. I appreciated all the artwork and all the cool map and stuff like that, but I didn't really enjoy it at a level like, for instance, that Russ would enjoy it, because he's traveled through Greyhawk and he knows all the stuff and that city, this is what Kit did that over and that, and all that stuff. Whereas I don't have that depth of buy-in to the thing. So I would say a good solid 4+. That's what I would say.
4+ is good. That's a fair number. I think before you get it's Forgotten Realms, not Greyhawk, which are slightly different.
Oh, is it?
Yes. But that's okay. Because
I would deal so well with that kind of relaxing.
Right. I think part of my really liking this game a lot, and my daughters also really like this game a lot, is the theme. So I should say that the theme is definitely part of what makes this game work for me. But I also really like these mechanics a lot. I think it's a easy game to learn. I mean, to know what the mechanics are. I think it does have a steep mastery curve, though, Craig. I think you're absolutely right about that. And I do think also it can be overwhelming in its choice, because you can tell the game rewards thinking ahead. And so you want to think ahead, but at the same time, if it's your first playthrough, it's really hard to think ahead because you don't know a reasonable number of events to kind of know where they're going to go. You don't know the right way to play your card sequence and what battles are really going to look like over, several of them and things like that. So I think it's hard. It's really hard to do that. So it's more of you got to kind of just go with the flow the first couple of times. But I really, really, really like this command card mechanic. Really like it. So I just really think it's a brilliant way to do it. I don't know, Geoff, if I've ever seen another game that does it this way before. I feel like it should have been done before, but I can't think of one
precisely
that does it quite like this. Yeah, so I'm really impressed by that. And I think it's neat that it's in a game, and I think that alone is worth trying. If you're a person who, like me and Geoff, who kind of like to see innovative mechanics, this is definitely an innovative mechanic. And you should if you get a chance to try Assault of the Giants.
Craig wants to just be spoon-fed his games and his snacks.
Wow. Yes. Now
I'm just going to let that go right off my back.
Just let it go. Let it go.
I'm due for a snack.
Yeah, well, you know.
So wait for 10 minutes. I do love the faction differences. The themes there are really nice. I think it's reasonably replayable. It does have the Game of Thrones component where you got fixed map positions, which I do find sometimes to be risky. But I do think that the fact that different races can be NPCs, along with the fact that you can play different factions, along with the fact that the event cards are going to come up and where those are going to matter is going to change. I don't think that's super restrictive. But that's out there. The Giant Slayer is another brilliant, innovative mechanic. I mean, we've seen the neutral dude that different people can control show up, like in Conan and other games from time to time. It's just done really elegantly here, and it really works. And I think there's two parts that are brilliant. One, it gives you something fun to do during your rest phase. But two, it drives home the theme and the scale in a neat way that if there weren't any human miniatures in the game, you wouldn't feel like you were playing giants, right? And I think that was a smart move. And I think another thing about this game that I think is really interesting is I don't know that playtime goes up materially with more people. And the reason I say that is, yes, there's more people competing for resources, and yes, the pools go bigger. But what ends up happening is more players means you see more resource cards, which are the primary thing that slows the game down because you need certain resources. They're all going to be out in front of players. You're going to see the thing you need somewhere on the table, and you just got to go figure out how you got to weasel it out of that guy's hands, either with a clever trade or something. So there's a lot. It scales well with more players, I think, which is a neat thing that not a lot of games at 6 players with this much theme and this many cool mechanics work well at that player count, and I think this one does. So I'm going to go with Craig, though. I'm going to give it a 4+ base, but I'm going to put modifiers in here because I'm going to. So I think if you are a
because Russ,
right? If you're a D&D fan, right, or you're kind of like me and you like to check out new mechanics, I'm going to give you a +1 to your roll. So basically, that makes it a 3+ for anybody who's into Dungeons and Dragons enough to know the difference between Greyhawk and Forgotten Realms and want to care about giants, and or if you are a big fan of like crazy, interesting mechanics that haven't been done a lot, I would definitely check this game out. So 3+ for those kinds of folks, 4+ for the average Joe. So after all that, Geoff, what do you think your likelihood is to want to try this game out after hearing us prattle on about it now for the better part of an hour?
Well, and because I'm not sure if I explicitly said this, so I have not played the game. I did get a copy. I borrowed Andy's fancy designer copy, and I pushed some pieces around and stuff like that, and certainly looked through it and read through all the rules and everything, but haven't actually played it. So, but I'm a big fan of conflict games, but conflict games done in sort of interesting ways. I mean, one of my top games is Kemet.
Right, Kemet's great,
and there's actually a lot of similarities that I'm seeing here with Kemet. In Kemet, has that same sort of command selection system, except you do it on a pyramid, and you have to pick a certain number of actions from each row. So it's the same kind of idea.
That's right.
That you have to plan ahead of what you're doing, but it's really amped up in this game, like you said, with the command card system, that you get all those bonuses for cards that are played later and stuff like that. So I'm kind of predisposed towards this game. I really like the different. I like that it doesn't force you just to beat up on other people to win. You can do that to get some extra points, and sometimes you have to do it. But it seems like when you would be playing that, it would be more, like I said, fitting in with the story, so people won't take it personally. So I could see, with families and stuff like that, you would avoid a lot of the conflict I had in my youth when we were playing Risk with my sister, and she took the dice and ran away. And that's a whole story I don't want to get into. But
there's something there. There's something there.
I think that you avoid that. With this game and the way that it's set up, I like definitely the asymmetric elements of the faction, but it's not so asymmetric that you've got to totally reteach everyone. I could certainly see that the first time somebody's playing this, you're going to just have to focus on your own stuff. You're not going to be worrying about what the other factions are doing. You're not going to know what their victory conditions are, and you may do some stuff that just may make it easy for the Storm Giants to do really well.
Right.
So that's both good and bad. It's bad that you're not going to play fantastically the first time, but if you're going to play this game multiple times, I can see that you can play it in different ways and in different levels, not just playing the different factions, but also really starting to pay attention to what they're trying to do and what cards they have left and stuff like that. And I like the story elements, although I have to say, when I was reading the rules and going stuff, there they really use the term, they use ordning points. They spell it out the whole time, and ordning and this ordning order and stuff for the terms. And one of the fire guys is the Vonindad, and you get your Vonindad token when you do something. And they always say that in the rules. And I, just personally, when I was reading through the rules and going through that, I stumbled every time I ran into one of those. You've got the cloud people move their city, and it's called Lin Armal. And they always say, the Lin Armal token, and you have to go back and see that. So, there's a lot of that, a little bit of, some of that in the rules where you're to learn all the components and the crazy names and stuff like that.
Yeah, my wife calls that the Tolkien effect. When people feel the need to put in really complicated, hard to pronounce words just to make it sound super fantasy.
Yes, so you're getting that here, and I'm assuming that all of those terms actually come from the D&D background and were not invented by the designer.
No.
So, that's maybe it's unfair to peg that on them, but, certainly it just struck me as made things a little bit more challenging when I was reading through the rules and learning how to play. But overall, I mean, this game, it really hits into my sweet spot. I like, kind of conflict, Ameritrashy, very thematic games that have really good, solid, underpinnings from a mechanic standpoint. So I think this has got this, and really I would want to try it. So I mean, the rating that I had jotted down before you guys started giving yours was a 3+. So that really fits in with what Russ was saying. It's a 4+, but if you're into conflict games and innovative mechanics, give yourself a +1. So that's right where I'm at.
Did you hear that, people? The math guy just said that my math worked.
Yep.
That's what I heard.
Worked out.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah.
April 19th, 2000. Okay. So great. Well, Geoff, thank you for taking so much time out of your busy schedule as designer and overall game guru to join us here on a little show. We really appreciate it. And
put one more little hat on all those other giant hats that you wear.
Right. Very tiny.
It was a fantastic time. I had a blast, and we're happy to do it anytime.
We do need to do this more often. I can't believe it's been 2 years since the last time we were on the show. So, Geoff, if people are looking for, what you're up to, where you're out and about to, where in the intertubes would they go to find out what's up with Geoff Engelstein?
So the Ludology podcast is at ludology.net. And there's my email address is there as well. And on Twitter, I'm at G Engelstein, which is at GENGELSTEIN.
Great. Well, thanks again, Geoff, and we'll see you this summer at one random con or another, at Gen Con.
Yeah, I'll definitely be at Gen Con, awesome. So we'll hopefully see each other there.
Great. Well, take care, Geoff.
Thank you.
Bye.
This edition of Jever Notice is brought to you by all of our friends at Patreon that have kept this show going for the last several years. We would be gone now. What would we be doing? Living on a deserted island, maybe. Or a mountain cave. I don't know. But we don't have to worry about that because we've got you guys in Patreon. And today I would like to say a special thanks to Paul Owen, Pedro Sierra, Peter Shaw, and Phil McPeak. Phil, Peter, Pedro, Paul. Thank you guys. And thank everybody who's taken the time to go to our webpage over there at patreon.com, check it out, and kick some change into the tip jar. We really do appreciate it, and it really, really does keep this show going. Did you ever notice how hard it is to tell when you're not being given the benefit of the doubt? If you think about it, if you're not being given the benefit of the doubt, you probably don't realize you're not being given the benefit of the doubt. This is a particularly trying time for me, as my son Reese is 6, going on 7 very quickly, and he has become one of the cool kids, which is interesting to me. He loves sports, which now in my defense, I had lots of friends in high school and college, and lots of different kinds of friends, and gamer friends, and athlete friends, and smart friends, and not so smart friends. I just wasn't the guy that walked down the hall and had everybody going, Craig, Craig. That's more like, cheers. And all the sports I played were individual sports, and I think that was just a fluke. But in high school, I did track, and I did swimming, and I did skiing for the most part. So Reese didn't, and I refereed soccer, liked it, wasn't really good at it, so I refereed it. Reese didn't like soccer, so he quit soccer this year. I was like, oh, okay. But he loved swimming, so he was going to do swimming. I was like, okay, that's, we got that. Karen's family is all into basketball, so that was going to happen either way. And of course, he started playing basketball, and he enjoyed it. And then his friends, because he, new school year in September, so he made a whole bunch of new friends, and they all happened to be very athletic, and they all play basketball for a bunch of first graders. I mean, as athletic as that gets. And I don't like basketball. I've never liked basketball. I'm not any good at basketball. That may be where the antipathy comes from. I don't know. But it's always been a joke in the family that her whole family is like a basketball dynasty, and I don't like basketball. So now Reese enjoys basketball, and which is fine. I love the fact that he likes basketball, that he likes anything. I want him to be successful and have fun and do whatever he wants to do. Then he decided he didn't want to do swimming anymore. I was like, oh, okay, whatever you want to do. And so now, so he's doing that. Now he's doing baseball. So he's doing basketball. He's doing baseball. For Easter, we got him a basketball hoop for the driveway, and he loves it. And I made him a tee for working on hitting in the front yard. And so and I it's not my thing, but I get it, and I love watching him have fun. So I'm right in there. I enjoy it. It's a little hard because it's not me. Luckily, he still says he likes playing games with me. So I mean, yesterday we played. 2 days ago, we played Blood and Plunder with a ship combat, and that was exciting, and he liked that. And he asked to play that. And then today he asked to play Armageddon, Shadow War Armageddon. And so we played that, and he enjoyed that. Of course, he won them both. And it's 6.5 or 6 3/4. So, I mean, I'm helping him a lot, but he gets the basic gist, and I'm trying to kind of get him. He makes the tactical decisions, and I just kind of show him which dice to roll and stuff like that, and explain his options. So he still does that, but he loves basketball, and now he's got basketball on the Xbox, and now he's got friends come over, and they're doing that, and he's like, Daddy, how do I do this? I'm like, I don't know how I do that, buddy, but I'm doing my best. And just the other day, talking to Karen about this situation, she was like, you really have to be supportive of the basketball. Well, I am supportive of the basketball. And that's I was like, you're not, so I'm not getting the benefit of the doubt here, am I? Just because basketball's not my thing doesn't mean that I can't enjoy the fact that my son is doing basketball. And so I do, and I enjoy the fact that he's doing basketball and that he enjoys it. That's the most important part. And so there I am. Okay. And I know that my wife has these really low expectations. Well, I know that you weren't really an athlete. I'm like, hello, I've got 3 varsity letters to your 1. So, but, so you gotta be careful. You gotta be careful both with what other people expect of you, and that you don't, put too low expectations on other people, which is what I feel like I'm dealing with right now. But, ultimately, of course I'm going to support Reese in whatever he does, and I enjoy that he enjoys it. All I care, as a teacher, I will tell you this. Want a piece of advice? Here's the thing. The kids who get in the most trouble are the kids who, when you ask them what they do in their free time, say, hang out. Okay? Now, that might just be obfuscation. They're not, just hanging out. Maybe they're role-playing and they don't want to admit it in front of their peers. So you never make a snap judgment based on that. But a kid who says, hanging out, and that's all he does is just sit around with his friends on the couch staring at each other, those are often the kids, not always. Nothing's 100%, but those are often the kids who are going to get in trouble. The kids who aren't in trouble are the kids who are doing all kinds of different things, whether it's sports or band or the history club or Model UN or any of that stuff. Those are the kids who are involved in stuff. They're learning all kinds of other stuff beyond just the regular lessons that school teaches. They're learning time management. They're learning commitments. They're not going to be the ones who, first day on the new job after they graduate college, don't show up because they're not feeling okay. They're the ones that are going to realize that you've got commitments, you've got to fulfill them. So there's lots of really important things to learn. But the most important thing is they just have someplace to go. So they get up off the couch. They're not hanging around wondering what they can do to cause trouble or whatever. So as long as he's doing something, I'm good. And the fact that he still enjoys playing games, I think is awesome. The ideal in the long run, and I don't think Karen agrees with me, but the ideal in the long run would be if Reese enjoys athletics and playing games, then I will be psyched. And I don't care what she expects or what she thinks of me or my low expectations. That's how I feel, and I'm sticking to it. That's all I've got to say about that. Thanks for listening, and good night.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@the d6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA discussions forum on DACADACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.
The back of the box for Expanse.
Right.
Yep.
And I finally got it yesterday. And it said that the OPA, it was describing all the factions, it said the OPA is throwing off the yoke of oppression. And it said YOLK, the yoke of oppression.
the yoke
And
of
I
oppression.
immediately sent it. So it was like, there's other, like, this missing commas and stuff, but this must be changed.
Yes.
Yoke of oppression. Oh, someone's got egg on their face. All right.
Russ,
had
well
to do that.
done.
I had to go there. It just couldn't let that hang.